Chapter 232. When Zhongsho heard that, he laughed. This time, it wasn't just a breakthrough in realm. However, looking at Chu Shui's situation, he knew that this brat was struggling with herself. He smiled and caressed Chu Shui's head. Dumb brat, this breakthrough is all thanks to you. If you didn't bring this talisman over, who knows how long your young master would need to comprehend this talisman. Chu Shui made a sound of surprise, and her eyes gradually lit up. She thought to herself that the talisman she pasted on Zhongsho's forehead didn't harm the young master. Listening to his tone, it seemed like it had helped him a lot. Just as she was feeling delighted, Zhongsho's face turned serious. However, you still have to be punished. This time you won't copy the desolate talisman scripture. Within 10 days, copy that mysterious talisman scripture 100 times. This time, there were many Spirit Master secret scriptures he obtained from Xian Mountain City. Amongst which Zhongsho benefited the most was this mysterious talisman scripture. The entire scripture not only recorded close to 60% of grade 4 spells and talismans of the 12 types, but it also recorded the main points of the talismans. There was also a description of the key points of these talisman techniques. There were 200,000 words in the entire book, and all of them were full of substance. There wasn't a single word of nonsense. Moreover, it was simple and easy to understand. It was the most suitable for spirit masters to use to build up their foundations. Chu Shui was stunned on the spot. Then, with a groan, her entire body powerlessly fell onto the soft couch. Using a pitiful expression, she looked towards Zhongsho. She knew that her young master would definitely take revenge after this matter. He was just too evil. Zhongsho directly ignored Chu Shui's pitiful gaze. This brat was good at everything. When she cultivated, she was really hard-working. However, in terms of spells, she didn't pay attention and didn't understand. She needed him to guide and supervise her. Actually, his expectations for this brat were far above Zhongyuan's. Once the battle martial body reached a certain level, the bloodline would be completely awakened, and one would be able to advance by leaps and bounds. His mastery of the martial Tao was far superior to others. Others needed to comprehend and understand the mystery, but Chu Shui could instinctively grasp it. However, this girl couldn't always rely on her instincts to make a living in the future. This spiritual technique was her trump card to protect her life in front of true experts. It was also beneficial to her martial path, and she had to learn it. Zhongsho then slapped Ruo Shui's, but as a punishment. Only then did he stand up with a smile and walk over to the table that Chu Shui had rearranged. He casually took some spiritual ink and talisman paper from the side. Zhongsho took in a deep breath for a moment before drawing another talisman on the talisman like a dragon or snake. It was different from the talismans he had drawn before, and it was not a talisman technique he knew before. Instead, when the Luck True talisman was completed, it naturally entered his mind. In just a moment, when the talisman runes on the talisman paper were connected together, a clear light seeped out. The color of this talisman paper changed. It was actually a 7-color change. Ruo Shui also cultivated spiritual techniques, and when she saw the situation, she was shocked. She stood up and looked into the distance. Young master, what kind of spiritual technique is this? I have never seen it before. Luck Praying Talisman. As the name suggests, it is a method to increase one's luck. Zhongsho smiled, taking out a cloud pattern flying knife that he had nurtured for a period of time. He chanted out a spiritual chant, his right hand forming a seal as he slapped on it. First, the spiritual light expanded, and then it swiftly calmed down. Zhongsho squinted and looked out of the window. When a scene appeared in front of his eyes, a bright glow exploded out, 14,000 feet out. Look at that purple-tailed eagle. Suddenly, a saber light shot out of his hand, almost without a shadow or trace, and went straight out of the window. Ruo Shui only saw a white light rise up, instantly 1,000 feet out. With the speed of lightning, he quickly disappeared into the horizon. Looking into the sky, that purple-tailed eagle circling in the air. Suddenly, it cried out in pain, its body losing balance and falling down. Ruo Shui was strong, and as a Xuanwu ancestor, her eyesight was far better than normal people. With just one look, she saw a cloud-patterned flying knife stabbed into the throat of the purple-tailed eagle. There was a moment of silence, and her beautiful eyes were filled with astonishment. 14,000 feet out, using just one talisman soldier to kill a Xiantian-level beast on the spot, taking its life with one knife. How strong was Zhong Shou's flying knife technique? If he wanted to take a person's life, even those peak Xiantian experts would only need one knife within 10,000 feet. In this world, no one would be able to avoid it. Was this because of Zhong Shou's luck-praying technique? This spell actually had such power? Zhong Shou was also silent, looking at his own hand. He was also shocked. The luck talismans that he drew in the past could increase the probability of everything, be it good or bad. It could also cause a person's fate to have an intense change in a short period of time. This luck-praying technique was an improved talisman technique, removing the bad side and only keeping the effect of increasing one's luck. However, the effect was naturally greatly reduced, only less than 1% of the luck talisman. However, even with just this bit of ability, when used on his six-god defensive knife technique, it was terrifyingly strong. In the past, based on his own ability, shooting out that cloud-pattern flying knife with all his strength, he could at most guarantee that he would heavily injure the purple-tailed eagle within 10,000 feet. At this moment, 14,000 feet out, he originally just wanted to try, but he really pierced the throat of that grade 4 beast with one knife. It was like the heavens were helping him. Be it the wind change or the angle that the purple-tailed eagle flew at, it was all as he predicted. There was no difference and no change at all. This was just the cloud pattern flying knife that he used in the past. If it was those cloud flame flying knives that Irin gave him that could carry more cloud, shocking, god-destroying sort intent, what would happen then? Zhong Shou couldn't help but suck in a cold breath, looking at his hand in shock. He didn't expect that this luck talisman would have such a strong effect. Maybe this talisman couldn't harm people, but with the buff of the luck-praying technique, then any spell or martial technique could raise power by grade. Closing his eyes and meditating, he could roughly feel that this luck-praying technique was just the most basic one. There are still many more powerful and wondrous spells waiting for him to discover and comprehend. Just this small luck-praying technique already had such strength. Zhong Shou didn't dare to imagine what the other spells would be like when they were used. Then, he felt that something wasn't right. Zhong Shou suddenly opened his eyes filled with doubt. The mysteriousness of this talisman wasn't much weaker than the two scriptures of the universe. Since that Lingyun ancestor was able to grasp it, then how would his achievements be only at the celestial realm? The foundations of Lingyun's sect definitely wouldn't be just 10 of the shrines. Being at the bottom of the shrines just didn't make sense. If this talisman was really left by the Lingyun sect ancestor, then didn't he get a huge benefit? Zhong Shou couldn't help but shake his head slightly. Then he stopped thinking about it and retracted his thoughts. He still laid in front of the table, his expression focused as he drew on the talisman paper. It was still the luck-praying talisman. Although there was one more talisman in his soul ocean, his realm wasn't stable yet. At this moment, the best way to stabilize the true spiritual talisman in his soul ocean was to continue drawing talismans. Moreover, this luck-praying technique could be considered his unique path technique. Apart from this shop, there was no other shop. He couldn't buy it, even if he wanted to. Drawing more was a good thing. Half a day later, Zhong Shou found Shurdan. To ask about the past of Lingyun's sect, this nominal disciple of Wujue Villa, who was a return to Sun Spirit Master and had seen a lot, Shurdan was the most suitable. Prince is talking about the 12 god talismans that the Lingyun ancestor left on the god talisman platform of Pill Spirit Mountain. Just that luck word god talisman? Shurdan thought back while frowning. I have only heard a little about Lingyun's sect before. Coincidentally, I know about the 12 god talismans. The Lingyun ancestral master was most proficient in the martial way. Although his spiritual cultivation was strong, it couldn't compare to his sword technique. At the end of the Cloud Desolate era, when he was forced to leave the Cloud world to select disciples, he specially left the Sky Sword and God Talisman platforms in the 3 continents and 10 islands. However, only our Donglin Cloud Continent was a little different. Zhongsho's brows furrowed and knew that she had entered the main topic. Legend has it that the 12 God Talismans on the platform only drew 7 out of them. The Lingyun Ancestral Master had only drawn 7 of them. The remaining talismans were all drawn by a senior. As for the other Central Cloud Continent, South Wind Cloud Continent, along with the other 10 islands, the last God Talisman was Lightning. Only our Central Cloud Continent has the word luck. When Shirdan said that, her brows furrowed. I heard that it had nothing to do with the Lingyun ancestor and the senior who drew the other God Talismans. It was left by another person. I heard that this person was not only a Saint Realm expert 10,000 years ago, but he also had grievances with Lingyun's sect. However, as for the exact situation, Shirdan didn't know. She only roughly knew that it had something to do with a bet. I heard that it had something to do with the legacy of the person who drew the talisman. If one could comprehend the God Talisman itself, one would have indiscernible strength. The reason why the God Talisman platforms of the other cloud continents and sky islands were all broken and only our Donglin Cloud Continent's God Talisman platform still exists till now is mostly because of this luck word. This talisman is hard to draw and is also really rare. In the many talismans and scriptures in the world, there are very few that mention it. Zhongsho instantly understood, his heart heaving a sigh of relief. Knowing that this talisman didn't come from Lingyun's sect made his mood much better. Following which he felt weird, slightly shaking his head. Something isn't right. If this talisman is really so important and concerns the legacy of a cloud desolate expert, then why didn't Lingyun's sect take it? Out-of-body realm and Xiantian realm disciples might not be able to copy it, but there are so many return to Sun realm spirit masters in Lingyun's sect. They can't do anything about such a small luck word God talisman. If return to Sun realm cultivators can't do it, then those body-shaping and true image realm cultivators shouldn't be a problem. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Chapter 233. Prince, you are making things difficult for me. Shirdan laughed awkwardly, looking at Zhongsho with an apologetic expression. I don't know about this. I only know roughly that it has something to do with that bet. Not only can't Lingyun's sect steal this talisman, but they also have to protect it. Shirdan's status was lowly, so she only knew this much. In the future, be it entering my Kenzo sect Wuju Avila or becoming the disciple of Tsang Xingdao, you'll be a direct disciple. At that time, you'll be able to find out more. Following which she looked at Zhongsho with a suspicious expression. Based on what I know, the Heaven Talisman platform on Pill Spirit Mountain was personally broken by the prince. Prince asking about this, did you have some comprehension of this luck talisman? Or did you obtain the legacy of that Saint Realm expert? Zhongsho immediately laughed out loud, just as he was about to speak. His heart moved as he looked out of the window. Not far away, Zhonggang was holding a red bird in his hand. A moment later, the expression of the Black Fox Cavalry's commander changed. He rode his horse to the side of the window. Prince, there is news from Gantian Mountain. Zhongshu and Zhongyang might have joined hands to decide on the Monster King position before you rush back. A moment later, 2 red swift birds landed from the sky, each flying towards Hu Zhongyuan and Tan Tao. In just a moment, the expressions of the 2 of them were really ugly. Zhongsho had expected it, his eyes flashing as he walked out of the carriage. Then, he looked towards the direction of Gantian Mountain in deep thought. A moment later, his brows furrowed. It seems like these few days we can't walk slowly. Get someone to bring a horse over. He looked behind, only to see the curtains of the carriage being pulled open. Zhong Yuan's majestic body stepped out from within. His eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. His aura was extremely maniacal. Not only was it due to the maniacal killing intent, but it was also because his realm wasn't stable and he advanced too quickly. However, just looking at the energy that seeped out, one would know. The current Zhong Yuan had already stepped into the peak of the 6 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm. Zhongsho sized up Zhong Yuan. instantly feeling that his gaze was like a sword, filled with an icy cold intent. When it stabbed over, it made one's heart feel cold. However, when he looked at him, he retracted his gaze. It was filled with humility and respect, but more was filled with anticipation as well as a desire to fight. Zhongsho couldn't help but frown. This fellow was too anxious and didn't listen to him. One must know that although the Earth Extreme pill, it wasn't omnipotent. In this world, there were always hidden dangers associated with a quick-fix method. Even if Zhong Yuan had comprehended the maniac lightning spear sense, after reaching the 5th meridian of the Earth chakra level, it was best that he needed a period of time to stabilize it. At that time, it would be best for him to enter the 6th meridian. Actually, he had guessed that when this fellow asked for the 2 Earth Extreme pills and the spiritual veins, how could he resist the urge to advance? Thinking about Zhong Yang and Zhong Hao, Zhongsho sighed helplessly, understanding Zhong Yuan's thoughts. This time might be his only chance to take revenge. No wonder this fellow would be so anxious. Thinking about it in his heart, Zhongsho gave up on the thought of scolding him. Although it wasn't good to advance quickly with his methods, he could make up for it. However, in the following period of time, Zhong Yuan's martial path improvement had to be suppressed. At this moment, a grade 4 Wind Rider foal that he stole from Feng Yu was already in front of him. It was several times stronger than normal Wind Rider foals, spitting out a fishy smell. Its body was covered in a steel-made horse armor, covering its entire body. Numerous steel spikes extended out from its forehead. It was like an iron monster, looking extremely vicious. Zhongsho directly flipped and jumped onto the horse. This grade 4 Wind Rider foal instantly gave out an unhappy neigh. However, before it tried to resist, it stood up on its hind legs. A wave of incomparably powerful soul remembrance pressed down from the top. It was like a giant hammer smashing down, causing its soul to feel dizzy. It was like it couldn't take it anymore, stumbling forward a few steps before recovering. Then, it didn't dare to be arrogant anymore, obediently lowering its head and neck, showing a subservient attitude. It only felt that intent was tightly wrapping around its soul, like as long as it tried to resist, it would be destroyed. If it had any resistance, it would be able to crush its consciousness. After totally subduing the grade 4 Wind Rider foal, Zhongsho nodded his head in satisfaction. He took out some spiritual beans and fed it to the horse. No matter what era, a stick and a carrot was the best way to tame beasts. Looking around, only to see that Hu Zhongyin, Tan Tao, and the others, as well as the 5,000 cavalry, all martial ancestor and above experts were all gathered at the side. Zhongsho smiled slightly. Are you all prepared? This time when we go back, we're going to kill people. Although it is a family war, there will be blood, a lot of blood. His tone was calm and indifferent. But at this moment, the dozens of martial Dao experts around him only felt a biting cold that penetrated their hearts. Following which, their fighting spirit boiled. Zhong Yuan's eyes lit up, unknowingly holding the purple lightning spear in his hand tightly. His eyes became even colder. Within Gantian Mountain City, it was totally silent. Before the second night watch, all the lights in the city were extinguished, only to hear numerous weapons clashing with armor, as well as the sound of iron hooves and footsteps. In the entire city, on all the streets, there were groups of fully armored soldiers patrolling. Any area that was slightly spacious was covered by the army. Many infantry square formations and cavalry formations were neatly spread out around the city. In the houses at the corners of the streets, there were numerous crossbows hidden. The aura was really quiet and solemn. They were split into several sides, showing signs of standing off against one another. On the side of the south of Gantian Mountain City, on a mountain peak that was only lower than the main peak, Hu Qinqiu was dressed in black armor, looking down on the entire mountain city. Beside him was Gantian Mountain Left Pillar, General Chiuwei. He was also dressed in spiritual armor, fully armed, holding a wolf tooth club on the ground. It seems like the three of them have joined hands. Looking at the changes in the city, Hu Qinqiu scoffed, filled with mocking intent. I expected that they wouldn't be willing, but I didn't expect that. that Zhong Ming and Zhong Hao would join hands because they are afraid of Zhong Yuan. Only Xiwan, what a waste. That person is Shou Er's uncle. He should be helping him. Zhong Xiwan? The ruler has always treated him well and has helped him a lot. He shouldn't have such thoughts. Qiu Wei's expression was wooden, and his eyes were extremely cold, like an iceberg. Even if he turns back today, I will persuade the crown prince to seize his military power as soon as possible and kill him. Hu Qinxiu smiled when he heard that. Although he was a little worried, he didn't retort. He still looked down, deep in thought. You and I join hands, along with the personal troops left by the ruler and the troops directly under him, as well as the strength of the various races. The 500,000 troops in the city are enough to stabilize the situation. Even if those few fellows join hands, they won't be able to shake us. However, even if those few people know that, they still aren't afraid and want to go all out against us. It seems like they have to rely on those few hidden sections. Who knows who will come? Let's hope they don't disappoint me. When Qiu Wei heard that, he frowned slightly. At this moment, he was extremely worried. However, Hu Qinxiu's tone was really relaxed, not caring about the enemy in front of him. He wanted to remind him to not underestimate the enemy. However, he was also afraid that he would dispel this fellow's thoughts of fighting back. In his heart, this fellow was really hesitant. He might choose to give up on the prince for the Iron Tiger race. However, after hesitating for a moment, Qiu Wei decided to be direct. Although this Hu Qinxiu was hesitant before, but all along, he barely kept to his word. What he said, even if he died and his race was wiped out, he wouldn't take back a single word. Under Zhong Weiran, he had fought alongside tens of Xuanwu ancestors in the city. However, only Hu Qinxiu and Chai Yuan were able to gain his trust from start to finish. Brother Hu, although this Gantian mountain city is under our control, there are 5 gates. However, out of the 8 city gates, 5 of them were personally controlled by the 3 of them. Furthermore, they were all facing the east. There is also the Jinshan Pass 50 miles away. There is also an army under Zhong Xuan. As he said that, Qiu Wei's eyes were filled with worry. Jinshan Pass was northeast of Gantian Mountain. Due to the dangerous terrain, it was one of the most majestic passes in the world. There was only a gigantic iron chain bridge connecting the two, and below was a ravine that was 3,800 feet wide. Chilly winds were blowing, and countless ghosts and evil beings were gathering there. Even cloud-stepping foals and wind-rider foals, these flying beasts were unable to cross it. The person defending here was a 7-meridian Xuanwu ancestor expert. He was really famous and was one of the strongest helpers in Zhong Xiwan's hands. If they were blocked here, they would need to travel another 1,700 miles to go around it. Even if they rode on the best windrider foals, they would need an extra day and night of travel. Who knows if the prince and the others could make it in time? That Hu Qinxiu didn't care, laughing out loud. Don't worry, head Qiu. You haven't seen the prince. As they say, a day apart is like 3 years. How can the prince 3 years later be the same as 3 years ago? The prince won't disappoint you. If he can't cross a small Jinshan Pass safely, then he will be the king. Then he isn't worthy of the monster king position. Qiu Wei was startled, obviously a loss. Just as he was about to ask Hu Qinxiu where his confidence came from. At the corner of his eyes, he saw a group of people. He turned his head and looked down, only to see the city gate in the north suddenly open. A group of cavalry suddenly entered the city. There were only 30 of them, all wearing white shirts. However, when they slowly entered the city, there was the aura of a huge army. The two of them couldn't help but frown, exchanging glances with one another. They both knew that the people Zhong Yang invited had finally arrived. Chapter 234. I was wondering who Zhong Hao and Zhong Yang were relying on. So, it is the 15th Xuanzu sect of the 19 spiritual lands. Looking at the white shirt people, Hu Qinxiu shook his head and laughed. In the next instance, his eyes squinted, showing a wary expression. The one leading them seems to be Lihu Jichong. Qiu Wei's eyes were also serious, showing a cold and sharp expression. Lihu Jichong, although this person wasn't famous for the art of war. However, In terms of the martial path, he was one of the strongest people in Donglin Cloud continent below the Ascended Realm. Although he was 8 meridians of the Earth chakra level, close to 95% of the 9 meridian Xuanwu peak experts weren't his opponent. His reputation was only lower than that of Gang Yi. He was also seen as the person who had the highest chance of entering the Ascended Realm in these 10 years. In the past, when Jichang challenged the famous experts of Donglin Cloud Continent, he had fought with this person and ended in a draw. At that time, his strength was slightly higher, but he was unable to obtain victory. In the few years after, Lihu Jichang entered the sect to cultivate. Who knows how much his strength had grown? His eyes jumped as he swept towards the west. Another cavalry force entered the city. There were also around 30 wearing black armor, all of them above the martial ancestor realm. The one leading them was dressed in Taoist attire, 7 feet tall, his body muscular. However, sitting on the horse, his body was light, like he was about to fly, giving off a celestial feeling. This is Gang Ye's junior brother Wu Ye, he, hiding the head, but showing the tail. It really matches what the ruler guessed. These two people came from 2 of the 19 spiritual houses, Daoming sect. I nearly thought that the 2 of them were factionless cultivators with no one to rely on. To send such elite disciples over, who knows what that Daoming sect is planning? They are probably planning something big. Still using a mocking tone, Hu Qianqiu's hands clenched tightly. Coincidentally, that Wu Yezhiren also raised his head and looked up with deep meaning. The 2 of them were tens of miles apart, exchanging glances with one another. The moment their gazes met, it was like lightning had exploded. The bodies of the 2 trembled slightly, after which they both turned their gazes away at the same time. This misty leaf, I haven't seen it in a few years. His cultivation had actually improved by quite a bit. I can deal with this fellow. It won't be difficult to kill him if we combine our forces. As for Lihu Jichang, I presume that Prime Minister Qiu has some confidence in him. Although Qiu Wei didn't speak, his aura continued to surge into the wolf tooth club in his hand. His aura seemed to merge with the entire mountain. His eyes shone brightly. Hu Qianqiu laughed and didn't ask anymore, only looking towards the south. I just don't know who Zhong Xiuan invited. You, and I can roughly guess the person behind Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang. However, I really don't know who this right pillar general is. The few city gates in the north and west were all controlled by Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang. Only the one in the southwest was under the control of Zhong Xiuan's old subordinates. If Zhong Xiuan had reinforcements, they would most probably enter from here. In just a moment, a bunch of cavalry rode their horses and arrived outside of the city gates. Just a dozen of them, but their aura was really strong. They were comparable to Wu Yezhiren's group. They were all white shirts and robes, but by the sides of their heads there was a pair of fox ears. Looking from afar, the appearance of this group of people was also extremely handsome. Hu Qianqiu's pupils constricted to the size of a needle. This was the first time he showed a solemn expression. It is actually someone from the 8-tailed sky fox Shui family that the ruler rejected. This Zhong Xiuan really deserves to die. His words were filled with killing intent. Hu Qianqiu's eyes were also filled with rage. Before this, he felt that Qiu Wei's suggestion of taking Zhong Xiuan's life was too much. However, at this moment, he really wanted to rip this Zhong Xiuan into pieces. However, at this moment, he could only suppress such thoughts and try his best to calm down. Although the 8-tailed sky fox king race, Shui family, wasn't based in the cloud world. It was only in recent years that they started to develop power in Donglin Cloud Continent. However, their power was only the tip of the iceberg, and they already had the ability to go up against the top 10 shrines. Although there weren't many of them, they were all above the martial ancestor realm, dual cultivators. Their combat strength far exceeded their peers. He also recognized the roughly 25 or 26-year-old person who rode the horse over. 8-tail race, Xuan Moyan, 8 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm. However, 3 years ago, he was able to defeat the combined efforts of Ling Feikong and Chai Yuan. His strength was so strong that it was indiscernible. Even he, Hu Qianqiu, didn't have any confidence in winning. Frowning and thinking for a moment, Hu Qinxiu smiled helplessly. It is actually him. Now we can only hope that the prince and the others can rush back quickly. With the prince here, no matter what these people do, they will be able to easily settle the situation. If not, we won't have any chance of winning. When Xiu heard that, he was shocked. He knew that although Zhong Gang was a personal army commander, his martial path was on the same level as Hu Qinxiu. Along with Zhong Yuan, who broke through 1,000 army and killed 4 Xuanwu ancestors. The 4 of them working together, using the strength of the army, it was enough to wipe out the many experts of the Shui family and Daoming Xuanzu sect. However, within the city, Chai Yuan and Ling Feikong, even Zhong Ming and Zhong Hao are all famous experts. The strength of both sides were on the same level. At most, after he and Hu Qinxiu worked together, their strength would be a little higher. However, hearing Hu Zhongyuan's tone, it was like he had everything in his hands. It was like he was looking forward to the Prince Zhongshu, who couldn't even cultivate. He didn't have time to think about the meaning behind Hu Qinxiu's words. Just as Xuan Moyan and the others entered the city. At the peak of Gantian Mountain, there was a loud bell ringing. Xiu Wei's eyelids jumped, and he knew that it was the bell that gathered everyone in Chongqing Hall. He raised his head and looked out 20,000 feet in the direction of the main peak of Gantian Mountain, only to see that at the edge of the high platform, there were tens of people standing there. The ones at the front were Zhong Ming, Zhong Hao, Zhong Xuan, and Ling Feikong. However, what he didn't expect was that Chai Yuan wasn't amongst them, making him relax slightly. His cold gaze softening slightly, Xiu Wei directly looked past those few people, his eyes stopping at the center, at Zhongshu, who seemed to be the leader of the group, only to see that kid looking down with a cold smile, his eyes filled with disdain. His eyes were filled with disdain, like Hu Qinxiu's life was already in his hands. Xiu Wei couldn't help but grit his teeth, only to feel rage surging in his chest, like there were thousands of knives stabbing around his chest, unable to get out. This kid, the ruler didn't wipe him out because of blood ties. Now, it gave these remaining evildoers a chance to rise again. Jun Shang has been wise all his life, but he places too much importance on kinship, which is really a problem. In the next instance, he heard Hu Qinxiu scoff, his tone filled with disdain. Scoff. Just a piece of trash who doesn't know his place. What are you being so proud of? Xiu Wei was startled once more. Although he hated Zhongshu to the extreme. He had to admit that the most outstanding talent of the Zhong family in these few years was indeed a rare talent, not weaker than any direct disciple of any sect. His methods were also extremely impressive. In just a few days, he had already integrated the 3 factions and gathered them under his command. It wasn't something that could be done just by relying on the strength of that Daoming sect. Just based on his ability to form alliances, he would definitely have a place in Donglin Cloud Continent in the future. Why did he become trash in Hu Qinxiu's mouth? In the dark night, groups of iron-armored cavalry were swiftly galloping in the dense forest. Under the moonlight, the talisman armor gave off a silver-cold light, extremely eye-catching. Be it the 1,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry or the mysterious armor Wind Dragon Cavalry of Xian Mountain City, their riding skills were exquisite. A total of 1,800 riders shuttled through the dense forest as if they were in their own backyard, moving freely and swiftly, with spells covering. Although the horse hooves were galloping, one couldn't hear any sound, not even a speck of dust. They had left behind the Xian Mountain elite cavalry, who were slightly slower. At this moment, 2 days had passed. That day, under the leadership of Zhong Gang, these 1,800 cavalry directly passed through the forest. 1 person, 3 cavalry, taking a shortcut deep into the core area. Be it Hu Zhongyuan or Zhong Yuan, they were all really familiar with the geography of this region. Galloping day and night, the original 4-day journey was shortened to 2 days. What surprised the Black Fox Iron Cavalry and the mysterious Armor Wind Dragon Cavalry the most was that their seemingly weak prince, who had never cultivated in the martial way, was actually able to keep up with them. After 2 days and 2 nights of galloping, his expression was really relaxed, not changing at all. He also didn't fall behind. Who knows where he got such stamina from? Just as the frontmost group of people finally passed through the dense forest, a group of people suddenly appeared. Zhong Gang suddenly raised his hand, causing the thousands of cavalry behind him to rein in their horses. Then he looked into the distance for a moment before he rode his horse to the side of Zhong Shou. "Prince, we have arrived. 20 miles in front is Jinshan Pass. However, in my eyes, let's rest here for a while before taking a detour." When Zhong Shou heard that, he didn't agree or disagree, driving the Wind Rider full under him forwards. It caused the people around to be confused and could only follow closely. This was a flat wilderness. There wasn't any high ground where one could spy on the Jinshan Pass. Zhong Shou continued forwards until he was tens of miles out. In the distance, the giant pass that was wrapped in clouds and mist could be seen. It was 450 feet tall, majestic and majestic. In front of him was a bottomless valley. The narrowest part was 20,000 feet wide. It was like a natural city protection river, tightly wrapping around the Jinshan Pass. In the middle, there was a 100 feet long giant chain bridge that connected the two sides. They were all thick chains, a total of 49 of them, firmly chiseled into the stone walls on both sides. Chapter 235. On top of the iron chains, there were thick steel plates about 100 feet long laid on top of them. On the two sides of the giant bridge, there were two giant white tiger statues suppressing. They looked really vicious, covered in a layer of white light, causing the surrounding energy and those ghosts and evil beings to be unable to get close. The entire giant iron chain bridge was one, giving off an ancient and majestic aura. Who knows how long it had existed for and who built it? The most important thing here wasn't the bridge itself. Instead, it was the four white tiger statues suppressing evil beings. If they got close, they would be wiped out. In the future, Zhong Shou had also heard of this place. At that time, there was no one here, only a patch of ruins. Only this bridge remained. The white tigers were still there. It was said that an ancient saint built it. Its goal wasn't to connect with things, but to cut off the yin veins here. It was a treasure itself, which was why even ascended experts would find it hard to damage it. As for the Jinshan Pass in the distance, as it was too far away, apart from the hundreds of feet of city walls, one couldn't see it clearly. Zhong Gang frowned, following closely behind. Zhong Shou looked at the pass, keeping silent. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. Opening his mouth once more, Jinshan Pass is 450 feet tall, and it is said that it only needs 3,000 people to defend to block 100,000 troops. The terrain here is really dangerous, and it is the only exit on the east side of Gantian Mountain. There are 15,000 troops here, and since the ruler died, Zhong Xuan added in 10,000 more. The pass guard Yu Wuxing is not only skilled in the art of war, but he is also a 7-meridian Xuanwu. It is said that his strength is not below that of Yang Xian. He is an expert that Zhong Xuan spent a lot of effort to recruit. 25,000 people, it isn't hard to break through. However, with this pass and dangerous path, as well as the spiritual formation within, no matter how skilled they are, they won't be able to use it here. It is best if we go around it. I know that 470 miles out, there's a place where there are very few evil beings. We should be able to safely cross this evil spirit ravine if we are faster. As his voice faded, Hu Zhongyin, who was beside him, nodded his head in agreement. Then he snorted coldly. It's a pity that my 500 Iron Tiger Great Halberd warriors couldn't keep up. Otherwise, we might have been able to take down Jinshan Pass. Young master, I know that place. Although it is a little far, we just need 24 hours to reach Gantian Mountain City. Zhong Shou still didn't reply. After a long while did he turn around and ask, "Then based on what you think, can Uncle Hu and Xiu last for another day in Gantian Mountain City?" Zhong Gang and Hu Zhongyuan instantly held their breaths. When they received the news, it was already 2 days ago. Who knows what would happen within Gantian Mountain City? What kind of unforeseen event would happen? It wasn't that he didn't know that time was precious at this moment, and every second counted. If there was a chance to fly to Gantian Mountain, then the two of them wouldn't be willing to spend even a moment outside. They wished that they could grow wings and directly fly over. However, the problem was that be it the Black Fox Iron Cavalry or the mysterious Armor Wind Dragon Cavalry, they were all cavalry. If they dismounted and fought, their strength would at least be reduced by 30%. Moreover, if they couldn't take it down and dragged on for too long, it would be better for them to take a detour. Only Zhong Yuan silently took out the purple lightning spear. He also placed down that vengeful-looking mask to cover his handsome face. He had followed Zhong Shou for several months. He already understood the personality of this prince. He seemed gentle, but he would rather break than bend. Things that were impossible in the eyes of others were totally different in his eyes. Once he made up his mind, no matter how others tried to persuade him, he wouldn't change his mind. As expected, in the next instance, Zhong Shou pulled out his sword and held the lightning-winged sword in his hand. There's no point in talking so much. Let's try. The fog is really thick, and it's the best time to pass. The cable bridge is too narrow, and too many people are useless. Just a few of us are enough. The others can follow after a few minutes. After saying that, he urged the Type 4 Windrider war colt under him, stepping into the thick fog and galloping towards the gigantic iron chain bridge. Zhong Yuan immediately followed closely behind. Hu Zhongyuan and Tan Tao exchanged glances with one another before helplessly following behind. Zhong Gang felt bitter. The few people here were all experts who could sweep an area. However, to say that they could take down the Jinshan Pass, he would be the first to not believe it. Within Jinshan Pass, there wasn't just one Yu Wuxing. Just Xuanwu ancestors alone, there were two. As for martial ancestor realm experts, there were 10 above. They were all people Zhong Xiuan trusted and were willing to fight to the death for him. However, in his heart, he only hesitated for a short while before he tossed aside all other thoughts and followed at full speed. His chest was filled with pride. He was someone who liked to be direct and wasn't good at thinking. He was used to being ordered around by Zhong Weiran and didn't like to use his brain. Just now, it was because the matter was huge, and he had to consider the safety of Zhong Shou, as well as the casualties of the Black Fox Iron Cavalry. This was why he chose the more appropriate way to go around. Based on his personality, he would have directly charged up the city without caring about anything. That would have been satisfying. Using 6 cavalry to charge up, although it was a little pointless. So what if he went crazy with the prince for once? The moment such a thought rose up, Zhong Gang injected threads of true qi into the body of the dragon-horned winged horse. He sped up once more, instantly surpassing Zhong Shou and leading the others as he stepped onto the iron chain bridge. His majestic body stood straight, blocking Zhong Shou. He also activated spells, and mist spread around him, covering the few cavalry around within. It completely covered up all sounds. However, just as he galloped 10,000 feet on the iron chain bridge, in the distance, a loud laugh could be heard from the impregnable pass. Is the person who came Zhong Gang? Today, your mist illusionary technique isn't that good. To hide like this, you most probably have bad intentions. You're asking to die, so don't blame me. When Zhong Gang heard that, he gritted his teeth and scolded out, "Yu Wuxing, I will remember your words. I won't bicker with you today. Zhong Shou Prince is here. Why aren't you opening the pass? Do you want to die?" When Tan Tao heard that, his brows furrowed. It wasn't wrong to say that Zhong Shou's men were all idiots. If he didn't mention the prince, there was a chance he could fool the pass. Now that he mentioned it, wouldn't the people on the pass be more wary? It would also make Zhong Shou more dangerous. Yu Wuxing in the distance laughed maniacally. As expected, you are here to escort the prince back to the mountain. Haha, before this, I was telling people that with your personality, you might be dumb enough to forcefully charge into Jinshan Pass. Who knew that you would really come? You're famous for being an idiot who doesn't think before doing things. Yu Wuxing, really respect you. Rage surged in Zhong Gang's chest. The hair on his head all stood up. Then he suppressed his rage. Zhong Shou Prince is the direct descendant of a ruler, the true ruler of Gantian Mountain. You dare to be rude? Pooey. Just a piece of trash who can't cultivate. A kid who doesn't even have the strength to fight a chicken. What right does he have to be my ruler? Below the city wall, Yu Wuxing laughed coldly, viciously spitting out a mouthful of saliva. At this moment, Zhong Gang had already galloped to the center of the iron chain bridge, 40,000 feet away from the city gate. Although it was covered in a thick fog, the two of them could see one another from afar. Looking in front of them, there were only a few people. Yu Wuxing was first slightly surprised, following which his eyes focused on Zhong Shou. After identifying him, he was instantly surprised. Then, he hesitated slightly before showing a fierce and vicious expression. All bows and crossbows, the target is that kid behind Zhong Gang. Shoot at him. Hey, a piece of trash without any true chi actually dares to come back to fight for the Monster King. Aim well. Shoot this prince to death. Yu Wuxing, will personally go in front of the new Monster King to ask for rewards. What are you afraid of? Young Master Zhong Shou rewards and punishes clearly. He is smart and decisive. He won't treat you badly. Why aren't you attacking? On the city wall, there were only 2,000 soldiers on duty and 1,000 archers. The other soldiers were still in the barracks below the city wall and had just been woken up. Although those archers all pulled out their bows and arrows, the 150 giant crossbows on the city wall were all controlled and aimed at the bridge. However, they were all hesitant. No matter how Yu Wuxing tried to persuade them, they didn't dare to be the first to fire. Yu Wuxing's brows furrowed slightly, seeing that Zhong Gang and his men were 10,000 feet below the city wall. In just tens of breaths, they would rush over. In the end, he lost all his patience. He turned around and waved his knife. A knife glow flashed, directly charging hundreds of feet. Close to 100 heads were sliced off with one knife. Blood spurted. The sky was dyed in an eye-piercing red. Yu Wuxing held his knife, his expression dark and cold as he patrolled on the city wall. His voice seemed to have spat out from the depths of hell, extremely dark and cold. You all want to do this the hard way? Today, I will personally end the lives of those who don't dare to fight to the death. Shoot! Those 1,000 archers didn't dare to hesitate anymore. The bowstrings' pong, pong, pong sounds instantly rang out. Arrows shot out like rain toward the iron chain bridge, amongst which there were tens of people who were slightly slower. Without needing Yu Wuxing to attack, his personal troops held knives and axes and chopped them down. Instantly, another 50 corpses fell on the city wall. It caused the thousands of soldiers and archers to feel a chill in their hearts. When the thousands of sharp arrows pierced out of the city wall, the spiritual formation within the city automatically activated. Threads of wind buffed the arrows. It caused the speed of the arrows to instantly increase. Along with the 150 crossbow arrows, in an instant they were 10,000 feet out and all fell down. The few people below also sped up, directly dodging a large portion of the arrows. For the remaining part, Dan first used her spell to summon a gust of wind out of thin air to blow away most of the arrows. Next, Li Luo rose into the air. His two knives danced, slashing out 100 knives in an instant. The sharp saber chi sliced apart the remaining arrows. However, there were still a few that escaped. Li Luo himself was hit by 3 arrows, his face turning purple. Hu Zhongyuan and Tan Tao both let out muffled groans. Both of them were unlucky and were hit. Luckily, their armor was firm and their injuries weren't heavy. Chapter 236. When they avoided the arrow rain, the few of them were less than 1,000 feet away from the end of the iron chain bridge. Zhong Gang charged at the front of the group. In just a breath, the dragon-horned winged horse under him had already flown beside the white tiger statue. The past city in the distance was only 4,000 feet away. Yu Wuxing, who was on the city wall, didn't panic at all. Instead, he laughed out loud. You are asking to die. Men, go rush Mr. Shui. Before he could finish his sentence, someone leaped up from behind the city wall and landed on top of the city wall. His expression was cold and arrogant. His face was handsome. At this moment, his eyes shone with a cold glow. You don't need to rush me. I have arrived. Just one step, and he was at the edge of the city wall. This Shue, surnamed middle-aged man, looked coldly at the few people who had charged across the iron chain bridge. Then, his brows furrowed. This is that prince? As expected, he has no internal energy at all. What a shame to our sky fox race. On the other hand, that Zhong Yuan is actually at 6 meridians of the earth chakra level. His talents are not bad. Only who knows whether or not he has comprehended the maniac lightning spear sense, like the rumors say. Scoff. So what if he comprehended the maniac lightning spear sense? If he doesn't leave early in the Xinshan Pass, he will only die. Yu Wuxing curled his lips in disdain and grabbed a big bow that was carried by 4 Xiantian martial masters beside him. The bow was 5 feet long and weighed 200,000 kilograms. Yu Wuxing grabbed it without much effort. In today's battle, I will definitely kill that Zhongsho with my arrow. Mr. Shue, please help me. He suddenly opened it, pretty much pulling it into a full moon shape. A shining wolf tooth arrow was placed on the arrow. When Mr. Shue heard that, he nodded slightly. Of course, as long as my Shue family agrees to something, we won't go back on our words. Only in the future, your ruler and right pillar general can't go back on their words. When he said that, he formed a seal. Instantly, a cool spiritual energy gathered in the air and landed on Yu Wuxing's body. In the end, it split into 2 parts. One part seeped into Yu Wuxing's body, while the other gathered on the wolf tooth arrow. Yu Wuxing's eyes immediately lit up as he felt his field of vision expand a little. His strength had also increased by half. The spiritual bow in his hand, which had a tension of 4 million caddies, was actually pulled back a little more. Without hesitation, he roared, "Shoot again!" Suddenly releasing the bowstring. The wolf tooth arrow shot out like a meteor towards the direction of Zhongsho. Just as it was halfway there, numerous strong winds swirled around the arrow body. He pushed the wolf fang arrow, which had already exceeded the limits of one's eyesight, to increase its speed once again. Almost at the same time, the 1,000 archers on the city walls also released their arrows, covering the sky and covering the sun. Zone Gang below originally wanted to jump into the air and charge towards the city wall. At this moment, when he saw the situation, he couldn't help but frown. In the end, he could only let out an angry snort. The saber in his hand slashed out and shattered the wolf tooth arrow that was shooting towards him. However, his entire body was also rebounded by the enormous force. It wasn't just the horse that was spurting blood from its mouth and nose. It was unable to gallop forward and was forced to stand on its hind legs. Even himself was forced back by tens of feet. When he looked forward, his face couldn't help but turn dark and sunken. His charge was blocked, and on the city wall opposite, a 3rd wave of arrows was prepared. Who knows, in just a short moment, the 25,000 troops in the city would be able to charge up. The current situation was obvious that he had missed the best chance to take down the city, and he couldn't see any hope. Who knows where the white shirt person on the city wall came from? His spell was actually so strong. Just one spell buff could cause the power gathered on the wolf tooth arrow to reach 9 million kilograms. Even as an 8 meridian Xuanwu ancestor, he couldn't block it. Scoffing, Zone Gang retreated 100 feet before his right foot stepped on the ground. His sliding back momentum instantly stopped. His chest instantly felt stuffy, but Zone Gang didn't bother. In the next moment, he exploded like a nuclear bomb, crazily charging forwards. His legs were like wheels. One step, and he was hundreds of feet away. His galloping speed was no weaker than his grade 4 dragonhorn winged horse. It was even a little faster. The situation today was one where even if he knew he couldn't win, he had to go all out. Coincidentally, at that moment, Zone Gang was startled. He noticed that the prince who was silently riding the horse beside him suddenly moved. He actually stepped on the saddle and jumped up into the air. In that instance, his aura became really different. Zone Gang panicked. Just as the enemy fired out tens of thousands of arrows, he jumped up and lost his footing. Wasn't he asking to die? They could help him block the arrows that the normal archers shot out. However, there were 3 Xuanwu ancestors, including Yu Wuxing, as well as that middle-aged spirit master whose strength was unknown. Any one of these people could easily take away Zhong Shou's life. He couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. He was too careless. The prince's martial path was one with the spirit, and his talent was top. However, he didn't go through any battle formations to actually do such a stupid thing when facing the enemy. At this moment, he didn't think about taking down this pass. The only thing he could do now was to try his best to save Zhong Shou's life and see if he could retreat in one piece. However, Zhong Shou didn't notice Zhong Gang's worry at all. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. His eyes were cold as he stared at the city wall of Jinshan Pass. Within his sleeves, several 7-colored spiritual talismans were burning. Then, they turned into balls of spiritual light that flew out and seeped into the bodies of the few people. Just as his body leaped into the air, a bright light burst forth from his eyes. Zhong Yuan, get up the city wall. Zhong Yuan didn't say a word, his entire body rising into the air. He was actually walking in the air, using the air as a flight of stairs as he rushed toward the city wall. Although he didn't know what Zhong Shou was planning and why he chose such a dangerous time, he only knew that Zhong Shou never did things without thinking and had never disappointed him. Then, he wouldn't disappoint the prince. Opposite him, Yu Wuxing's brows furrowed. As expected, it is the maniac lightning spear sense. Zhong Yuan had just flown out 400 feet when a purple lightning gathered around his body. It caused his speed to increase. The closer he got to the city wall, the thicker the lightning glow around his body. Looking out from afar, it was like a lightning shuttle piercing through the air. However, when his eyes looked behind Zhong Yuan, he was shocked. His eyes instantly constricted, only to see Zhong Shou fly up a full 300 feet. However, he still didn't stop. His body seemed to be pushed by an invisible force as he continued to charge upwards. In the next instance, Yu Wuxing couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. He is actually Xiantian. This Zhong Shou is actually at the initial Xiantian realm. The eyes of the middle-aged man, surnamed Shui, moved slightly, revealing a look of shock. In the rumors, the person who didn't even have the strength to fight a chicken at 14 years of age was only 1 meridian lower than Zhong Shou, who was praised as a genius. After being startled for a moment, the middle-aged man calmed back down. However, his expression was really serious, killing intent shining. That Yu Wuxing laughed out loud once more. What a good Gantian mountain prince. You actually hit it so deeply. However, today, no matter how talented you are, you will die here. Bai, Rinli, why aren't you attacking? Once again, Yu Wuxing pulled the bowstring, but this time there were 3 more wolf-toothed spiritual arrows in his fingers. His breathing was slowly adjusted, entering a special rhythm. Each breath would inhale large amounts of heaven and earth spiritual energy into his body. His mind would also enter a clear and calm state. Although the Yu family secret 3 consecutive arrow technique wasn't a secret technique. However, at this moment, even if it was an earth chakra, Xuanwu master, he could kill him 800 steps away. Needless to say, that prince was only at the initial Xiantian realm. When that Zhong Shou's body was 300 feet away, Yu Wuxing had already measured his charging speed, his eyes turning sharp. The spiritual bow in his hand. Pong, pong, pong. 3 bowstring sounds rang out. On the left and right, 1,000 feet away, there were 2 people who pulled their bows. With the buff of the middle-aged man, surnamed Shui, they each shot out an arrow with strength only a little weaker than Yu Wuxing. 5 wolf-tooth sharp arrows were shot out in an instant. In a moment, they were 2,000 feet away. On the other hand, Yu Wuxing's brows furrowed, his eyes filled with mockery. He could almost see the scene of the crown prince falling not long after. To capture bandits, one had to capture the leader. As long as this person died, no matter how strong those few people were, they would be like dogs without a home and wouldn't be a problem. However, when his eyes met those of Zhong Shou, he was shocked. There wasn't much panic within, only coldness. It was obvious that his rationality was still there, and he was extremely calm. Even if he was in a killing situation, it couldn't shake him at all. A prince who hadn't seen much of the world and hadn't been through many battles. How could he have such a gaze? Just as he was feeling weird, Zhongsho waved his sleeves. Like it was done casually, 5 cold glows shot out from his sleeves. They were also extremely swift, in just 1/100th of a blink of an eye, a full 400 feet, heading right for those 5 wolf-tooth sharp arrows. At this moment, Yu Wuxing's hand was touching his left arm. Although his chain arrow technique was strong, 3 arrows in a row, each arrow could close to double the combat strength. However, it also caused huge damage to the meridians in his arm. Once he used it for 7 to 8 minutes, his left arm wouldn't be able to use any strength. At this moment, when he saw the situation, he found it amusing. This place was beside the evil spirit mode. The wind was not only chaotic, but also intense. Even with his archery skills, he wasn't able to guarantee 100% accuracy within 8,000 feet. He could only estimate the rough location. Was this prince so scared that he went dumb? He actually wanted to use these 5 flying knives to break the arrows that he shot out? How dumb was he? Zhonggang and Tan Tao's eyes were filled with despair. Just as everyone thought that the cold glows, which they couldn't even see, clearly were about to cross paths with the wolf-tooth arrows. However, he only heard a light clang sound in the air. Chapter 237. It sounded like one sound, but it was the sound of 5 consecutive metal clashing sounds, sounding out at the same time. Naturally, they were all mixed together. At this moment, be it above or below the city walls, it was deathly silent, with Zhongsho's Xiantian realm strength. Even if he used the power of the external pill, he wouldn't be able to break open the 5 wolf-tooth spiritual arrows that each had tens of millions of kilograms of strength. However, in this crazy wind, as long as he caused the 5 arrows to deviate slightly, he would be able to cause them to land in the air. As for the 5 cloud flame flying knives that finally appeared, they accurately hit the tip of the arrow where it was the easiest to be hit. The trajectory of the arrows was also instantly deviated. Just a millimeter was enough to cause a difference of 1,000 miles, brushing past Zhongsho, who was in midair. Personally witnessing this scene on the city walls, be it Yu Wuxing or Old Man Shui, they were all stunned. Shock, disbelief, all sorts of emotions rose up in their chests like waves. That Yu Wuxing clenched his fists, nearly breaking all his teeth from gritting them. How is it possible to hit the body of the arrow in the crazy wind? How is there such an exquisite flying knife technique in this world? How did he calculate the changes in the wind? And how was he able to predict the trajectory of his wolf-tooth arrows? Such a shocking technique actually appeared in the hands of a kid who wasn't even 15. This Gantian mountain prince, apart from being at the Xiantian realm, was far more indiscernible than he expected. Below the city walls, Hu Zhongyuan, Tan Tao, and the others all roared out after a moment of silence. They all jumped up into the air. Knife energy surged, combining with the 2 of them. They instantly formed a dense knife veil around Zhongsho's body. All of the arrows that were flying over were intercepted one by one. In that instance, he was so touched that he was about to cry. Zhongsho could break the 5 wolf-tooth arrows that had tens of millions of kilograms of strength, but he was unable to avoid the dense rain of thousands of arrows, as well as the 150 four-armed giant crossbows on the city walls. He soared into the air and placed himself in danger. Previously, they had been puzzled for a while, but at this moment, in their eyes, it was very different. It was clear that the crown prince had entrusted his life to the 2 of them. He had left his back to them without any reservations. It was as if he had completely entrusted them with his back. A gentleman would die for his friend. If the monarch treated him with sincerity, how could the subject not repay him with his life? He only felt that with such a monarch, he would have no regrets even if he were to die here. At this moment, no matter if it was Hu Zhongyuan or Tan Tao, there was nothing else in their hearts. There was only one thought left in his mind, and that was to protect the crown prince with all his might, even at the cost of his life. The saber light of the tyrant tiger saber and the mandarin duck saber spun rapidly. Close to 120% of their normal combat strength erupted from the bodies of the two. Countless saber shadows slashed out like a storm. All the arrows that came close were shattered into pieces. However, their strength still gradually reached its limit. A few giant crossbow arrows suddenly pierced in through the gaps of the saber shadows. Just as Zhongyuan and Tan Tao's faces turned green, their eyes filled with anxiousness. Another two saber lights, one long and one short, joined in the saber storm. All of the remaining arrows were smashed into pieces. When the two of them sank down and landed on the saddle once more. When they looked out once more, they saw that Li Luo had chased up from behind. Although his body was hit by numerous arrows and was heavily injured, his expression didn't change as he smiled. The two of you really have good saber techniques. I, Li Luo, have never seen such a well-coordinated saber technique. 1,000 arrows fired at the same time, and you were actually able to break it. Hu Zhongyuan and Tan Tao exchanged glances with one another, only to feel a burning hot blood flow between the few of them. They all laughed out. Brother Li's also a good man. I respect you. Hu Zhongyuan stared forwards like a tiger staring at its prey. The current battle was far from over. He had to help the prince to take down this city. On the city wall, when Yu Wuxing saw that Zhong Yuan was less than 30 feet away from the city wall, lightning flashed. Lightning surged around his body. Even the spiritual formation within the city seemed to be unable to block it. That invisible barrier was like a hot knife through butter as it was quickly broken apart. His expression finally changed, and his heart thumped. He suddenly had an extremely bad premonition. The expression of the middle-aged man, surnamed Shui, sunk, putting himself in danger to attract the arrows. Covering this Zhong Yuan to charge into the city? This crown prince is really good at scheming and is also very bold. Yu Wuxing was slightly shocked, looking around, only to see that the soldiers and archers around were all stunned. They were all shocked that the prince that they thought couldn't cultivate actually had such strength. They were unable to come back to their senses for a long time. The current situation, it was obvious that they couldn't rely on him. He couldn't help but grit his teeth, once again holding the spiritual bow in his hand. By Hai, Rinli, attack and stop this person for me. Today I want to see how many of my arrows this future unparalleled General Purple Lightning Spear can block. The two Xuanwu ancestors on the left and right didn't reply, flying over from hundreds of feet away. Each of them held a knife and a stick, pretty much attacking at the same time. They swiftly struck towards Zhong Yuan, who was in midair. That middle-aged man, surnamed Shui's brows furrowed as he continued to look thousands of feet away, only to see that after Zhong Shou's body charged to 450 feet in the air, he didn't land. Instead, he was stepping on a shining purple longsword. His speed was actually almost twice as fast as before. He swayed and swayed as he sped over from the direction of the city wall. The middle-aged man couldn't help but shake his head in disbelief. He opened his eyes wide and looked carefully. Immediately, he sucked in a breath of cold air. Driving the sword to fly, he is actually a knight wandering realm spirit master who formed 5 true spiritual talismans. In his heart, he only felt like the mountains were shaking and the earth was shaking. He felt that his heart realm was about to fall apart. In the next instance, 2 thin knife lights appeared from Zhong Shou's sleeves, one in front and one behind as they sped out. The speed of the knife shadow was tens of times faster than before. Halfway there, it started to change. Looking out, there were dozens of knife shadows that were unpredictably moving. For some reason, looking out, it felt like a sword cultivator was driving a sword to slash over. At this moment, they were less than 3,000 feet apart. In a flick of a finger, the knife light had already arrived above the city wall. Then, the entire city wall was silent once more. One could hear a pin drop. In the blink of an eye, by Hai and Renli, the 2 Xuanwu ancestors were still blocking Zhong Yuan, who was inches away. In the next blink of an eye, one could see blood spurt out from Bai Hai's neck. His entire throat had been pierced through by the flying daggers, leaving behind a hole the size of a cup. Large amounts of blood spurted out crazily. Bai Hai's eyes were filled with shock, scratching at the wound before he fell forward. His life force was endless, his 4 limbs shaking like he was trying in vain to stand up once more. On the other hand, Ren Li's face turned pale with fright as a warning sign arose in his heart. When he saw that Bai Hai was killed by 1 knife, he was filled with terror. His heart was filled with terror as he frantically retreated to the left. He didn't bother about the many archers and armored soldiers who were waiting behind him. He didn't bother about anything as he charged backwards, smashing into the crowd. What he wanted was to be as far away from that lethal knife light as possible. He saw the dozens of knife shadows flash as they chased from behind, not giving up at all. They suddenly turned. He actually passed through the gaps under the feet of those soldiers. From a most unbelievable and most undefendable angle, a knife pierced through Ren Li's left chest, leaving a wrist-sized hole. Ren Li's eyes were filled with disbelief for a moment. It was like he didn't dare to believe that he was on the verge of death. It was also like he couldn't believe that his life would be taken away by this small flying knife. That middle-aged man, surnamed Shui, couldn't help but take a step back. His neck and left chest seemed to spread out a cold intent. This is the second change in direction of the flying knife. Cloud, shocking God, destroying sword intent. Spirit masters had sword-driving techniques which could kill people from thousands of miles away. Martial cultivators had hidden weapons throwing techniques which could similarly harm people from a distance. However, both of them had their pros and cons. The former was more agile, while the latter gathered the true chi of the martial cultivator, going forward with no return. Be it killing strength or speed, it was far better than the sword-driving technique, only lacking in agility. Normal martial cultivators, after reaching the ascended realm, would be able to use the true chi stored within to change the direction of the weapon and complete the change in direction. It would make the hidden weapon agile and chase after the spirit master. However, at this moment, this initial Xiantian Meridian person not only completed the change in direction of the flying knife, but he also did it twice. As for that cloud-shocking God-destroying sword intent, it was something that one couldn't believe. The secret technique of the Lingyun sect appearing on the body of the Gantian mountain prince was enough to shock one. On the flying knife, there was sword intent added onto it, which made one even more shocked. Following which he seemed to have thought about something, the pupils of the middle-aged man constricted. This is the 6-God defensive knife technique. 6-God defensive knife. When the knife slashes out, it will take one's life. Legendary level secret technique. He didn't even think about it, not hesitating at all. A slight wind rose under his feet as he floated under a flying, shuttle-shaped spiritual artifact. He also swiftly fled behind the city walls. All the random thoughts in his heart disappeared. He only wanted to go all out to rush back to Gantian Mountain City. No matter what, he had to inform his race members about this news. At such a young age, he was already a knight wandering spirit master. Initial Xiantian, 6-God defensive knife. If the Shui family wanted to return to the cloud world, this Gantian mountain prince definitely couldn't be left alive. They had to go all out to get rid of him. What a good Gantian mountain monster King Zhong Wei ran, to actually let his only son bear with it. He was obviously a top talent, but he acted like a piece of trash who didn't accomplish anything, causing others to roll their eyes at him. He hid it from them for so many years, he really deserved to die. On the side of Zhongshu, he was also startled. Since he came to this world, this was the first time someone recognized the background of his flying knife technique. Chapter 238. During the Cloud Desolate era, martial path cultivation methods and spirit master cultivation methods were split into 13 grades based on power and cultivation prospects. Foundation building, basics, Xian prying, top, mystical, pinnacle, legendary, earth penetrating, heaven shaking, saint spirit, ability, world destroying, supreme. The original version of his 6-God defensive knife technique was the 7th grade, legendary. Legend had it that during that era, The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was vast, and there were numerous treasures. Not only did the cloud world give birth to many experts, there were also many celestial realm experts from other worlds and even saint realm experts who entered the cloud world, bringing with them numerous techniques. However, when the cloud desolate era ended, a large portion of the cultivation methods were lost, or in the successive wars, their legacies were broken, or they were brought to other worlds by experts who left. The remaining ones were just the first 6 grades. Even the indefinite spirit emperor art that Zhong Weiren personally created, the mysterious moon wood brilliance method that Xian Yuan trained in, was just at the initial grade 6 pinnacle technique. The Emperor Flame spiritual art of the Flame Bear race of Blazing Flame Mountain was just a basic cultivation method of the Monster Emperor. His 6-god defensive knife technique was at the legendary grade right from the start. What he got that year was an improved version by a Saint Realm expert. When it was cultivated to the peak, it was a grade higher than the original, the 8th grade, Earth Penetrating. The martial arts division of the Cloud Desolate era had no meaning at this moment. Even in the future, they didn't reclassify those martial path techniques and spirit master cultivation methods into different grades. However, from this, one could see the strength of this flying knife technique, Zone Power. Seeing that handsome middle-aged spirit cultivator say the name of his flying knife technique, he didn't hesitate to turn around and flee. Zong Shou's brows furrowed once more. Moments later, he didn't bother at all. Just like what such a person said, the 6-god defensive knife. When the knife came out, it would kill, it would never miss. Only within 10,000 feet around him. Even if one's land galloping technique could compare to those ancient beasts which were famous for their agility, it was useless. He felt that the true chi in his body that was slightly dry from the 2 knives had recovered a little. He waved his sleeves, and another cloud flame flying knife shot out from his sleeves, striking 1,000 feet out. When it pierced through the invisible air barrier formed by the spirit array on the city wall, it was already too late. A saber shadow flashed, and the saber body made a high-speed spiral, forcefully piercing through. His speed didn't decrease at all as he chased after the white-shirt middle-aged man. That Shui, surnamed middle-aged man, could feel the sharp blade chasing from behind. He immediately gave out a sharp cry. He threw out 10 talismans in a row and chanted an incantation, causing a violent wind to blow behind him. Countless wind blades could be vaguely seen moving and slicing within. Some of the nearby armored soldiers were unable to dodge in time, and were all minced in minced meat and blood. Even if it was the legendary 6-god defensive knife, no matter how skilled Zhong Shou's knife controlling techniques were, he was still unable to move. Even if he wasn't completely blown away and wasn't shattered by the wind blades, it would still be difficult for him to be injured. But when he turned around, he felt as if his heart had stopped beating, only to see that less than 2 feet long flying knife piercing through the wind. Although it was also swaying, it was always able to perfectly avoid the most intense wind currents and pass through the wind blades. Although the trajectory had some changes, for some reason, it gave him a feeling that it was several times more dangerous than before. The Shui surnamed middle-aged man scoffed, suppressing the fear that rose up in his heart. When his body passed through the back of the city wall, it instantly sunk. The outcome was as he expected. The flying knife started to change direction for the first time. The tip of the knife also tilted and chased down swiftly. It was like a cloud and mist, unable to see where its true body was. Using the downward momentum, its speed increased greatly. The Shui surnamed middle-aged man didn't panic, calmly rising up once more. It caused the cloud flame flying knife to change direction for the second time, and it was already within 30 feet. In just a few breaths, it would be able to pierce through his throat. Not only was the Shui surnamed middle-aged man not shocked, but a smile appeared on his face. Even the 6-god defensive knife technique couldn't be as nimble as a spirit master and sword cultivator at the Xiantian realm. As long as he dodged this time, he would be safe. The 6-god defensive knife never missed, but it wasn't unbreakable. Such a thought flashed across his heart as his body changed once more under the influence of the spiritual artifact. The flying knife had changed direction for the second time and definitely couldn't catch up to him. However, in the next moment, the Shwe surnamed middle-aged man's eyes opened wide. The warning in his heart not only didn't reduce, but instead rose to the maximum at that moment. No! He immediately turned his head and looked behind him. Then his chest instantly turned ice cold. He saw that just as the cloud flame flying knife was about to sweep past him, a ball of fire and ice mist spat out, a fire and water spiral. Then, the flying dagger borrowed this little bit of recoil to change its direction again, flying straight for the vital point of the throat. 3 changes of direction. How is that possible? The Shwe surnamed middle-aged man screamed out, unable to maintain the calmness that he had been maintaining. Numerous body-protecting spells rose up on his body. Large amounts of spiritual energy and soul power were injected into his feet. He only hoped that his speed would be a little faster as he changed directions once more. He wasn't at the day-wandering realm, so this physical body was still really important to him. He went all out to dodge, but in the end, he wasn't able to avoid it. The cloud flame flying knife hit his right shoulder. The world-shocking true energy of the fire and water spiral instantly charged into his body. With a loud honk, blood mist covered the sky, when the knife light passed through his body and flew into the distance. There was also a bowl-sized hole on his right shoulder. The Shwe surnamed middle-aged man only felt intense pain. His body was riddled with holes from the spiral energy. Apart from his vital energy weakening, his soul also started to wither. On the city wall, although Yu Wuxing couldn't look back, his spiritual sense was able to see the situation behind him. All of a sudden, his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His face ashen white, his eyes filled with intense fear. How was there such a terrifying flying knife technique in this world? If he was the one facing that knife, what would happen? Would he be able to escape with his life from the cloud flame flying knife? In his heart, he wished that he could immediately turn around and flee. However, at this moment, he couldn't move at all. Zhong Yuan, who was charging over with the power of numerous lightning bolts, had already broken through the invisible energy barrier covering the city wall. He stepped onto the city wall. Not only did his soul lock onto him, but his eagle-like eyes were also coldly looking over. The cold glow at the tip of the spear was even more shocking. This caused Xiao Qian's face to twitch slightly. He no longer had any of the arrogance from before, only a trace of regret. He was originally a general of Gantian Mountain, a subordinate of the Monster King. If he knew that this was the case, why would he risk his life for Zhong Xiwan's small kindness? At the start, he didn't expect that the Gantian Mountain Prince's martial path had reached the Xiantian realm, and his spiritual cultivation had reached the night wandering realm. His flying knife technique was extremely strong, pretty much taking one's life. Even Mr. Shwe, who was an 8 talisman returned to the Sun Spirit Master, was heavily injured by one knife. The few people in front of him, be it Zhong Shou, Zhong Gang, or this new unparalleled purple lightning spear, they were all terrifyingly strong. And when they worked together, it made one feel despair. In the next instance, he saw Zhong Yuan take a step forward and charge over. Yu Wuxing was shocked, instantly dispelling all his random thoughts. The spiritual bow in his hand gave out 3 consecutive pung, 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 pung sounds. 3 wolf-tooth arrows instantly shot out like shooting stars. Less than 120 feet, even a peak Xuanwu ancestor expert who had merged with 9 spiritual veins would be forced back by his arrows. He saw Zhong Yuan's spear suddenly shake, flicking upwards and deflecting the first arrow. The spear tip flicked downwards, smashing onto the second wolf-tooth arrow. Lightning danced crazily, smashing the arrow to the side. When Zhong Yuan's spear shook for the second time, it was when the third arrow shot out from a bowstring. One coiling and one shaking. The iron arrow and spear gave out a series of buzzing sounds. Finally, the last wolf-tooth arrow was deflected away. The area between Zhong Yuan's thumb and index finger was already bleeding. However, his arm was still as stable as steel, waving his spear and stabbing into the heavy sword images that Yu Wuxing hurriedly waved out. Those who betray my Gantian mountain die. The lightning snake instantly flashed crazily. Just one spear caused Yu Wuxing's head to explode like a watermelon. The remaining corpses were all shattered by the vast lightning. Sweeping his gaze around, he saw that the soldiers and archers were all retreating to the side like a wave. Especially those trusted subordinates of Yu Wuxing. Their faces were ashen white. A portion of them were still unable to believe that these 3 Xuanwu ancestors were killed in just a dozen breaths. That overbearing energy that no one could block caused everyone on the city walls to lose all their courage. Is that really our Gantian mountain prince? Didn't they say that he couldn't cultivate? How is he so strong? This purple lightning spear Zhong Yuan is actually so strong. A day ago, I heard people say that this person led 3,000 cavalry in Ruahai Straits to crush the 400,000 alliance army of Yunxia and Blazing Flame City. Consecutively killing 4 Xuanwu ancestors. I didn't believe it before, but it seems like it is true. The prince is a knight, wandering spirit master, and also has such an unparalleled general as his trusted subordinate. Isn't the position of the Monster King for sure? That Zhong Shi and the others are dreaming to actually dare to fight for the position with the prince. At this moment on the city walls, although the people didn't make a sound, their thoughts were in a mess, and their eyes had no fighting spirit. Zhong Yuan was too lazy to bother, looking at the middle-aged spirit master who was driving away on the artifact. The purple lightning spear in his hand was still tightly held. As long as he slightly recovered his energy, he would be able to kill this person under his spear. In the next instance, he heard a giant explosion from below. It was Zhong Gang who slashed open the city gates with one knife. Following which he jumped onto his horse and stepped into the city. The horse-slaying knife in his hand flew out and charged into the sky. Chapter 239. The knife's shadow was sharp as it spun and charged into the sky. Instantly, it rose thousands of feet and chased behind the middle-aged spirit master, bringing with it a vast amount of knife energy as it slashed down. A 10-feet-long Zamadeo sliced the heavily injured Shui, surnamed middle-aged man, into 2, blood spurting out. Following which Zhong Gang hollered, "Jinshan Pass has been broken. Today, if you don't surrender, you will die." His body surged with energy, his aura was intense, his voice shaking tens of miles around. Not only were the soldiers and archers on the city walls silent, even the soldiers who had stepped out of the barracks and had already stepped onto the city walls stopped one after another. His eyes were filled with loss, and he didn't know how to react. At this moment, although there were tens of thousands of people gathered here, no one dared to attack and point their weapons at the 3 people on and below the city walls. Hu Zhongyuan and Tan Tao followed closely behind and stepped into the city gates. The former just needed to sweep the city and knew that victory was set. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Following the prince is so satisfying. I knew that the prince was really smart and invincible. How would you not be able to take down this small Jinshan Pass? Zhong Shou was stepping on the city walls, regretfully keeping the cloud flame flying knife in his hand. This Zhong Yuan and Zhong Gang really knew how to steal the limelight. He was originally prepared to show off his strength and kill the remaining 2 people. He wanted to create a show of Prince Zhong taking down the pass, God Knife killing 3 Xuanwu, to not let Zhong Yuan's Ruahai Straits trampling 1,000-troop show. However, these 2 fellows acted to destroy it. How annoying. However, when he heard Hu Zhongyuan's words, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. This fellow was sucking up to him again. Invincible, he wasn't that strong. As for being smart and invincible, he knew that it had nothing to do with him. He looked at his hand in deep thought, a weird glow flashing in his eyes. The combination of the talisman of luck and his 6 gods defensive saber technique was so powerful that even he felt terrified. A top-grade martial arts formula and a little bit of luck allowed the accuracy and lethality of his cloud flame flying daggers to at least double. If it was him in the past, he would at most be able to lightly injure the middle-aged spirit master. It would be considered not bad if he didn't disgrace the name of Nevermiss. However, just now, not only were those two Xuanwu ancestors killed with one knife, even that return to Sun Spirit Master couldn't escape from being heavily injured. In the past, this six-god defensive knife technique was only an earth-destroying level secret technique at the end. However, with the addition of the luck-praying technique in the future, he might even have a chance to go head-to-head with the heaven-shaking martial path. Below the immortal realm, the saber strikes to end one's life. The moment his thoughts reached that point, he was suddenly jolted awake. He only felt that Li Luo and Shi Dan were behind him. Carefully examining Li Luo, who was covered in blood, he saw that although his injuries were heavy, they didn't reach his vitals. Only then did Zhong Shou smile. "Thank you. Just now it was all thanks to you." He reached out towards Yu Wuxing's corpse, and a few medicine bottles appeared in his hand. After sweeping with his spiritual sense, his lips curled up coldly. This Yu Wuxing was most probably working for Zhong Xiuan for these things. That person was indeed willing to spend money. However, he didn't take it to heart, casually tossing a golden medicine bottle to Li Luo. The latter was first shocked when he received it, but when he opened it, he was shocked. This is the Dragon Blood Earth Pinnacle Pill. His face was filled with struggle. A moment later, he exhaled. Li Luo can't accept this item. The price for escorting the prince was already paid by the prince when we were in Jiafu City. Zhong Shou waved his sleeves and said, "No worries," before walking towards the corpse of the middle-aged spirit master. Li Luo hesitated slightly and didn't reject it, placing the medicine bottle into his chest. Shi Dan, who was at the side, looked on with admiration. The Earth Pinnacle Pill was a saint item for Earth Chakra experts, and this Dragon Blood Earth Pinnacle Pill was a saint item among saint items. It was a variation of the Earth Pinnacle Pill, and its medicinal effects were really strong. Not only could it have a 100% success rate, but it could also cause Xuanwu ancestors above 7 meridians to raise a grade. Along with some spiritual medicine, one could obtain a thread of dragon blood, changing one's talents and obtaining the power of the god dragon, greatly increasing one's strength. However, Zhong Shou didn't even take a look and gave it to Li Luo. Just this magnanimity showed that he was worthy of being a ruler. Before this, after the battle at Ruohai Straits, Shi Dan felt that Zhong Shou was too stingy, being so calculative about that bit of money. At this moment, she understood that when it was time to be generous, this prince didn't hesitate at all. The way he looked at Li Luo was obviously filled with respect and admiration. In the future, even if Zhong Shou didn't join that Song Xingdao, he would serve under this prince. Although there were thousands of armored soldiers around, Zhong Shou didn't care at all. He acted like all of this didn't exist as he walked on the city wall. With Zhong Yuan and Li Luo, these two martial path experts protecting at the side, there was indeed no need for him to be so careful. Just as he walked to the other side of the city wall, a rumbling sound spread out from the iron bridge. 1,000 black fox iron armor, 1,000 mysterious armor wind dragon cavalry, under the command of 2 Xuanwu ancestors, surged over. Looking at the city gates that were already wide open, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. This impregnable pass that was said to be unbreakable even with the strength of hundreds of thousands of people was actually broken through by just a few people. In terms of miracles, this time it was no less than the 1,000 cavalry formation at Ruohai Straits. However, these 2,000 people were all well trained. After being slightly stunned for a moment, they came back to their senses. They all charged in from within the city gates, 2,000 cavalry bringing with them a rumbling sound as they stepped into the city. Their eyes were ice cold as they looked at the sides with killing intent boiling. Those who don't surrender, kill. A few thousand roars sounded out within the pass. It also forcefully suppressed Zhong Gang's roar from before. The sound reverberated, making the intent even sharper. However, in the next instance, there were dozens of clanging sounds. Dozens of people put down their weapons, following which it was like it was contagious. The 25,000 troops within the pass all threw down their weapons. Zhong Shou grinned as he looked down from the city wall, especially the corpse of the middle-aged spirit master. At this moment, Tan Tao was already searching the corpse. A moment later, his face changed slightly. Prince, this person has the Sky Fox monster body. He seems to be from the eight-tailed Sky Fox Shui family. After saying that, he took a few things and flew onto the city wall. As for Zhong Gang and Hu Zhongyuan, their expressions changed. They quickly followed behind and leaped onto the city wall. The items that the middle-aged spirit master left behind were just some talismans as well as pills for spirit masters to cultivate. After Zhong Shou took it, he naturally kept the spoils of war into his sleeves. At the end was a book with the words "Snow Washing the World" written in gold. Snow washing the world? So it really is someone from the Shui family. Zhong Shou recognized this item. This cultivation method was what the eight-tailed Sky Fox Shui family used to shock the cloud world. A rare dual cultivation technique. Casually flipping through it, it was an incomplete copy. Moreover, it only had the cultivation method before the day wandering. The contents were obviously castrated. Taking a look, he didn't dare to be interested anymore, tossing it to Zhong Gang. This book was useless to him, but to Zhong Gang and Rua Shui, who were also dual cultivators, there were many things they could learn from it. When Zhong Gang flipped through it, his expression was extremely ugly. Tan Tao took in a deep breath and scoffed, "Prince, it seems like behind this Zhong Shuan is the eight-tailed Sky Fox Shui family. In the future, it seems like Argantian Mountain needs to be more wary. These monster race royal families left this world to avoid trouble. Now, they want to come back to take the throne and let us be ruled by them. There isn't such a good thing in the world. Shin Mountain City was a place where humans and monsters lived together, but there were more half-monsters. Tan Tao was also mixed blood, which was why his words were filled with hatred. Scoff. That Zhong Xiwan really deserves to die. Hu Zhongyuan also felt the same way. Doesn't he know the theory of inviting a wolf into the house? What a fool. He and Tan Tao were originally not on good terms, but after the battle today, everyone was giving it their all, and their teamwork was surprisingly good. The impregnable pass guarded by 3 Xuanwu ancestors and 1 return to Sun Realm Spirit Master was actually broken through by them in one go. The excitement in his heart did not diminish. His impression of Tan Tao had also changed a little. So this fellow didn't only have schemes and schemes. He was also someone who was willing to spill blood and risk his life. When he heard that, he instantly found Tan Tao more and more pleasing to the eye. Zhong Yuan was deep in thought. I know the power behind Zhong Yang. It is the 15th of the 19 spiritual house sect, Xuanzu sect. As for Zhong Shi, I can guess a little. As expected, it should be the 2nd of the 19 spiritual houses, Daoming sect, along with the 8-tailed Sky Fox Shui family. Overlord Duke and Pillar Chio situation, although it might not be worrisome, they would be under huge pressure. The Overlord Duke he was talking about was Hu Qinxiu. Gantia Mountain City had some positions, so Zhong Weiran arranged the elites of the various races with various ranks. The race leader of the Iron Tiger race was the Overlord Duke position. A look of admiration appeared in Tan Tao's eyes. Out of Zhong Shou's few subordinates, the only one he had high hopes for was this Zhong Yuan. We indeed can't stay here for long. If possible, it is best to rush back to Gantia Mountain City. If we are faster and can lock down the news, we might be able to sneak attack them. As he said that, he hesitated once more. Then, he suddenly bowed towards Zhong Shou. Prince, just now, the 3,000 soldiers on the city walls, please kill them. Zhong Gang and the others were all shocked. Then, it fell silent again. The elite soldiers within Jinshan Pass were mostly trained by Zhong Weiran and couldn't be considered Yu Wuxing's trusted aides. To a certain extent, they could be considered Zhong Weiran's direct subordinates. Just now, everyone saw that if it wasn't for Yu Wuxing forcing them, those archers definitely wouldn't shoot at Zhong Shou. He couldn't bear to kill all of them just like that. Thinking about it, if the traitor didn't pay the price, then in the future, what would happen if everyone followed suit and shot at the prince? To be continued. Chapter 240. The people present had all been through numerous bloody storms and didn't lack viciousness and viciousness. At this moment, their expressions were unusually calm. Even Sherdan, who was a girl, kept silent. As for the thousands of archers on the city walls, their faces were ashen white. They wanted to pick up their weapons again, but when they saw the 2,000 steel-like cavalry below the city walls, as well as Zhong Yuan and the others who were glaring at them with blades in their hands, they could not help but feel despair. Without anyone else attacking, just a few people on the city walls were enough to wipe them all out here. Even the rest of the soldiers within the city looked over with enmity in their eyes. Zhong Shou was in deep thought. A moment later, he shook his head. "They're all my subjects. There's a reason for this, and I can't bear to kill them. However, those who went against their superiors and rebelled have to be punished. Everyone above the rank of colonel is to be beheaded. As for the others, find someone to identify them. As for those who are innocent, we will deal with them after today's matter ends. A lifetime of hard labor is unavoidable. Send them to the center camp. If they don't die in 10 years, they are lucky." Hearing those words, the entire city heaved a sigh of relief. Only apart from those Yu Wuxing's subordinates who were filled with despair. The rest of the crowd felt relieved. The people on the city walls felt fortunate to be able to avoid death and temporarily keep their lives. Below the city walls, Zhong Shou was delighted. Since he didn't care about those archers who attacked, then he wouldn't punish them too heavily. As the name suggested, the center camp was an army made up of sinners. Within the camp, not only did they have to do the most tiring things, but when they faced war, they had to charge at the front of the army and were often used as cannon fodder. However, if they went to the center camp, they would still have a bit of hope. Tan Tao frowned when he heard that and didn't think much of it. He lowered his voice. "Prince, if it was a normal time, it wouldn't be inappropriate to deal with them like that. However, if the matter of you cultivating in the martial path and spiritual cultivation spreads out, the Shui family might not be able to help you. Not only does the Shui family have unfathomable intentions, but even the enemies of ruler have to be wary." At this point, the expressions of the surrounding crowd changed. Zhong Shou shook his head, not bothering at all as he looked excitedly in the direction of Gantian Mountain. It would be best if he could hide his martial path and spiritual spells, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. As for other people, he could naturally kill them without any hesitation. However, most of the people on the city walls were Zhong Weiron's subordinates who had fought to the death for Gantian Mountain. Zhong Shou did not want to lose justice just because he wanted to hide his own affairs, and he did not want to do it. So what if word got out? If there was any trouble, they could just come at him. He didn't believe that the sword in his hand wouldn't be able to stop this storm. Moreover, there weren't many demon clans in the first place. The entire Gantian Mountain only had 7 to 8 million. In addition to the population of the demon race in the vassal cities, there were at most 20 million of them. However, in Gantian Mountain City, he still had a bunch of people to clean out and kill. It would be best to preserve as much of the elite combat strength of the demon race as possible. Rather than killing them himself, why not let them die on the battlefield? If they didn't have enough combat strength, Gantian Mountain City most probably wouldn't be able to survive the true chaotic times 10 years later. This Tan Tao was smart, but due to the limitations of his generation, his foresight was still a little shallow. Zhong Shou didn't agree or disagree. Tan Tao was also helpless, sweeping around, only to see that Zhong Yuan and the others were indifferent, obviously following Zhong Shou's orders. As for Zhong Gang, his eyes were shining brightly as he looked at Zhong Shou. He most probably treated Zhong Shou as Zhong Weiran was reborn. He obviously wouldn't persuade him. He could only sigh helplessly and bow once more. The prince is benevolent. His tone was really sincere. The prince's handling of this matter was really magnanimous, even not caring about the big picture. When Zhong Shou heard that, he mocked himself. Benevolent? Only people from the future would know how cold he was. The spiritual wave rose. Numerous beasts evolved. Within a few years, hundreds of Mind Stone mines were discovered. Hence, there were tens of cities that rose up. The entire Cloud Continent was in constant war due to fighting for beast crystal resources and new Mind Stone mines. Once these 3,000 people entered the center camp, they had no chance of surviving. Not to mention 10 years, they wouldn't even last 5 years. Suddenly his eyelids jumped. Zhong Shou turned slightly and asked curiously, "Did you all hear that? Just now I heard a bell sound." This Shinshan Pass was actually only 50 to 60 miles away from Gantian Mountain. The bell sound most probably came from there. Zhong Gang also listened calmly. A moment later, a bright glow appeared in his eyes. It is indeed a bell sound. It should be the meeting bell in front of Chongjin Hall. Zhong Shou was delighted when he heard that, thinking that it was most probably Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang who were gathering the race leaders and generals of Gantian Mountain for a meeting. It was most probably to discuss the race leader position. In other words, the Gantian mountainside was definitely still under the control of Hu Qianxiu and Xiu Wei. This time he came back in time. If he really chose to take a detour, then the outcome would be uncertain. 9 consecutive bells. These people are so anxious. Why don't we rush over to join in the fun? When Zhong Gang and the others heard that, their eyes lit up and they were filled with excitement. Zhong Yuan caressed the purple lightning spear in his hand, waves rising in his chest. They were close, only 50 miles away. In less than an hour, they would be able to see those 2 people. As for the spear in his hand, it was already unable to endure its thirst. At the peak of Gantian Mountain, within the wide Chongjin Hall, Zhong Ming, Zhong Hao, Zhong Shi, Zhong Yang, Ling Feikong, Zhong Xuan, as well as Xuan Moyan, Wu Yezhenren, Li Hu, and Ji Chong were all sitting in rows. In the upper seats, only 3 empty seats were left for Hu Qianxiu, Xiu Wei, and Chai Yuan. At this moment, Zhong Shi was sitting high on the Monster King throne. His eyes were cold as he looked towards the direction of the hall. When the bell in front of the hall stopped, Zhong Ming scoffed coldly. That Xiu Wei and Hu Qianxiu are so arrogant. The meeting bell rang 9 consecutive times, and they still haven't arrived. They treat our Sky Fox King race as nothing. How arrogant. If it was me, knowing that there was a trap waiting for them, I wouldn't come. Zhong Yang laughed coldly, his tone filled with mocking intent. Like he was still unwilling in his heart, with a provocative tone, he said towards Zhong Shi, 4th brother, Xiu Wei is the left pillar general. Hu Qianxiu is the Iron Tiger race leader. These 2 people aren't here. Since they aren't here, the other race leaders and generals naturally have an excuse. If they aren't here, your Monster King position won't be confirmed. Even if you claim it here, you won't have the right to do so. When the great elder Zhong Ming heard that, rage appeared in his eyes. Zhong Shi squinted, taking a look at Zhong Yang, not bothering at all. Acting like he couldn't hear the gloating intent in Zhong Shi's tone, he said expressionlessly, "No worries. Great elder, please send someone to send a message over. Say that if they don't come, then don't blame me for messing around. At that time, I might be able to burn this Gantian Mountain. To have 8 million people die with me is not bad." When the people in the hall heard that, they all sucked in a cold breath. Li Hu Jichong smacked the armrest, praising loudly. Young Master Zhong Shi is really bold. What you can't get, others can't either. That Xiu Wei is still okay, but I know Hu Qianxiu's life. He definitely will not come. That fellow cannot care about this city, but he can't care about the lives of the old and weak. Once the weapons rise, then you can't blame young master. Ling Feikong frowned as he heard that, doubt flashing in his eyes, but he suppressed it. For the first time, he doubted whether or not his decision was wrong. Old brother Ji praises me too much. Zhong Shi smiled reservedly. If I have no choice and have no choice but to attack, I will need the help of old brother Ji and senior master Wei. That Wei Jinren instantly smiled and nodded his head. Jichong laughed out loud. Young master is generous. Our Xuanzu sect won't be stingy. You don't have to say, I will go all out. Zhong Shi smiled in satisfaction, looking towards the right at the teen with an unusually handsome face, especially brother Xuan Moyan. Whether or not I can successfully ascend to the throne will depend on your Xue family illusionary mist heart technique. As long as they are 1,000 feet around me, as long as they don't have the strength of grade 6 beasts, Naturally, they will listen to young master's orders. They won't go against you. Shui Moyan opened his eyes, looking deeply at Zhong Shi. Let's just hope that at that time, young master doesn't forget your promise. Zhong Shi's lips curled up. Grade 6, that was the return to Sun Realm and Xuanwu ancestor. In the entire Gantian Mountain City, how many people could reach that realm? Don't worry. Once I ascend to the position of Monster King, I will ask for your Shui family's hand in marriage. In the future, generations of marriage will be connected. Out of everyone in the hall, only Zhong Xiwan's face was green, like he was furious but was forcefully suppressing it. Zhong Shi was lazy to bother, his tone suddenly becoming firm. That Zhong Shi needs at least a day to return to Gantian Mountain. Hu Qinxiu is afraid of breaking the vases. As for the generals and race leaders, Brother Shui will deal with them. Only the left pillar Qiuwei is left. I really can't think of a reason why I can't win. Zhong Shi, will definitely take the position of Gantian Mountain Monster King. The entire palace was silent. Everyone seemed to be shocked by Zhong Shi's boldness. Although he hadn't ascended, every word and action of Zhong Shi was filled with a strong confidence and magnanimity. Even Zhong Yang frowned slightly, not saying anything more. Although he was unhappy in his heart, he knew that Zhong Shi had already won. If he wanted to fight with him, he would be digging a hole for himself and asking to die. After a short while, Zhong Hao spoke once more. The others are okay, but I'm worried about that Chai Yuan. That's okay too. Zhong Shi once again looked deeply at Zhong Xiwan, whose face was really ugly. Uncle Chai is righteous. Even if he won't help us, he won't help that piece of trash. He is only unhappy with the marriage between the Shui family and me. In the future, as long as I give him an explanation, Uncle Chai will naturally understand. Chapter 241. Uncle Chai is righteous. Even if he won't help us, he won't help that piece of trash. He's just unhappy with my marriage with the Shui family. In the future, as long as I give him an explanation, he will naturally understand. Zhong Shi's tone was still confident and overbearing. He walked down from his steps with his hands behind his back. Looking at the majestic surroundings as well as the throne behind him, he suddenly felt emotional. Actually, the person I respect the most is the late ruler. That year he started from scratch, and in just 10 years he established such foundations and ruled the west of Donglin Cloud Continent. Unfortunately, he died before his ambitions were realized. Zhong Shi, took over. I will inherit the ruler's ambition and sweep Donglin. Hearing those words, Zhong Ming nodded his head slightly, using his hand to stroke his beard. The late ruler has done a lot for our Sky Fox Zhong family, which is why although he snatched the race leader position of our Zhong family direct bloodline, I have never been annoyed with him. However, be it the Monster King position or the Zhong family race leader position, in the end, it has to be in the hands of our Zhong family direct bloodline. This is the will of the heavens. Rage surged in Zhong Xiwan's eyes. However, for some reason, he suppressed it and didn't explode. He looked fearfully at Shui Moyan, who was smiling but not smiling. Ling Feikong frowned once more, suppressing his unhappiness. I don't care about all this. I only want to ask that Zhong Shi prince. How are you going to deal with him? Zhong Shi's expression didn't change, turning around and exchanging glances with Ling Feikong. Uncle Ling, if Zhong Shi ascends to the Monster King position, will he let me live? Seeing his expression change, Zhong Shi shook his head. Of course, I still remember the promise I made to you. As long as he is well behaved, I won't kill him. At worst, I will just lock him up. If he is willing to give up his position, I can even let him leave Donglin. However, if he still has any thoughts, Zhong Shi will not show mercy. Only then did Ling Feikong relax, slightly nodding his head. It is good that you remember. I only hope that you can keep your promise in the future. Zhong Shi smiled. A cold intent flashed across his eyes. He was still looking out of the hall with his hands behind his back. After today, the Gantian Mountain Monster King position would be in his hands. He had millions of soldiers in his hands, and his power was overwhelming. No one in this world could take it away from him. Within the hall, Zhong Ming looked at Zhong Shi's back view with satisfaction. It was estimated that after today, the cauldron would be settled. The descendants of the Zhong family's direct line of descent were indeed extraordinary. Even Zhong Yang wasn't bad. What was that Zhong Wei ran? He could only be arrogant for a while. It was still 10,000 feet away from the main peak of Gantian Mountain on that stone platform. Hu Qinxiu walked back from afar with a mocking look on his face. When he came to the side of Chiu Wei, his voice was solemn. "Why don't you guess what the messenger that Zhong Shi sent over said to me?" Seeing Chiu Wei's stunned expression, he revealed a look of curiosity. Hu Qinxiu laughed coldly, the disdain on his face getting thicker and thicker. He said that if the two of us aren't willing to go over to see him, he will burn, kill, and rob in Gantian Mountain City. Simply put, if we don't let him be the banker and win money, he will flip the table. He really hit the nail on the head, even more vicious than his dead father. Chiu Wei's steel-like teeth instantly started to chatter. The silver-white mace that he held with both hands actually pressed down the stone ground by several feet in that instant. Following which he looked towards Hu Qinxiu worriedly. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't expect this. What he was most worried about was that Hu Qinxiu would waver because of this. Gantian Mountain City gathered all the monster race members. The moment Zhong Shi acted viciously, they would suffer heavy losses. With this Overlord Duke's personality, he would most probably hesitate to attack. That wolf cub is indeed vicious, but he is also very smart. I, Hu Qinxiu, have been seen through by that fellow. As he said that, he saw that Chiu Wei's eyes were filled with wariness. Hu Qinxiu couldn't help but roll his eyes speechlessly. Don't worry. If it was half a year ago, I might have fallen into his trap and be threatened by him. But today, even if he wants to start a war and kill all the old and weak in the city, I won't go over. At most, I will go all out with him. This time Chiu Wei was really shocked. He looked closely at Hu Qinxiu's face, not missing out on any of his expression and changes in his eyes. Only when he stared at him till he felt his hair stand did he let him go. That's weird. Brother Hu, this doesn't seem like your personality. Forgive me for being direct, but I really don't understand why you don't want to see that Zhong Shi. It doesn't seem like it. Hu Qinxiu gave a self-mocking laugh, following which he looked towards the sky with an expression like he was on a pilgrimage. As for the reason, it is because I know, if I follow what Zhong Shi wants, not only will I let the ruler down, in the future, my Gantian Mountain will also face a calamity. Although that prince doesn't seem to have much ambition. However, looking at his situation, he won't be willing to let the ruler's foundations be stolen by others. The one who will win in the end will definitely be the prince. Chiu Wei couldn't help but squint. This was the fourth time Hu Qinxiu mentioned the prince. His tone was filled with anticipation and confidence. What was this fellow trying to do? Even if I say it, you won't believe me. Hu Qinxiu turned his head, his face solemn and serious. Half a year ago, I met the prince. His sword path is one with the spirit, and he won a sword against me at the Xiantian realm. His spiritual cultivation has reached the night wandering realm. He is a rare talent in the world. Even if he can't inherit Gantian Mountain, with his ability, he might be able to create a foundation better than Gantian Mountain City. Chiu Wei's brows were tightly furrowed. Looking closely at Hu Qinxiu's expression, it didn't seem like he was faking it. After a short while, his brows furrowed. Overlord Duke, are you sure you aren't joking? Or did you eat the wrong medicine? Night wandering realm, 14 years old, and able to travel at night. Even in shrines and sects, there are only 10 of them. Based on what I know, the prince has only been in Linhai College for 3 years. Even if you're joking, there should be a limit. I know you have high hopes for the prince and are also disappointed. However, he is still young. In the future, if we can invite a skilled pill master, he might have a chance to cultivate. Hu Qinxiu was startled, and then he shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He thought to himself, see, even if I tell Chiu Wei, this guy won't believe me. Those old fellows in his race were like that. Even his old friend Chai Yuan was the same. If he said it to Zhong Shi and the others, they would laugh their heads off. Only by letting those fellows personally taste the cold glow of the prince's sword could they wake up and remember it deeply. Who knows how the person beside him would react at that time? Thinking about that, Hu Qianqiu's lips couldn't help but twitch, suppressing the urge to laugh. It was obvious on his face. He remembered that the ruler had taught him to not show his emotions and to be a shrewd person. Hu Qianqiu had always remembered that. However, at this time, he felt that it was exceptionally tough. 50 miles of distance. Even with the speed of the Windrider foals, they only used an hour. However, this time it wasn't just 2,000 cavalry. Within the Jinshan Pass, apart from the infantry, there were 3,000 elite cavalry. Apart from that, there were also thousands of war horses, personally chosen by Hu Zhongyan, Zhonggang, and Zongyuan to follow on horseback. On the plains below Gantian Mountain, close to 10,000 people rode on war horses, majestically galloping towards the east of Gantian Mountain. The Black Fox Iron Cavalry and Mysterious Armor Wind Dragon Cavalry were filled with fighting spirit. The elites selected from the Jinshan Pass were even more eager to fight. Their eyes were blazing with fire. They wanted to fight right away to wash away the humiliation and the name of betraying their master. 30 minutes later, Zhongshou could see the few lights on the peak of Gantian Mountain. First, he was shocked at the size of Gantian Mountain. They actually dug out the entire 10,000 feet mountain to make a city. The area was 60 to 70 miles wide. The houses within were connected. From the peak of Gantian Mountain, one could look down on the entire Gantian Plains. The city walls were majestic to the extreme. The city walls were 600 feet high, and there was a four-armed giant crossbow placed every 100 feet. However, this giant city was deathly silent. There were very few places on the mountain with lights. The foot of the mountain was blocked by the city walls, and one was unable to see what was going on. Looking out from afar, there were numerous essence and vengeful energies charging into the sky. Just one look, and one felt terrified. Compared to the 400,000 Alliance army at the Ruahai Straits, it was several times stronger. What a majestic city! Zhongshou sucked in a cold breath. In his memory 4 years ago, when he left Gantian Mountain, this city wasn't so majestic. Just this city protecting spiritual array that covered an area of 60 to 70 miles was already hard to imagine. To build this city, our Gantian Mountain spent 4 years of our income. This is why it is so majestic. Not only are there 8 million monster race, but there are also 6 million humans. There are also numerous merchants, close to 18 million people. Actually, the ruler didn't want to build the city. He said that when we needed to defend it, it would be too close to destruction. Due to my father and the others persuading us, we had no choice but to spend a lot of money to build the formation to protect the old and weak. Only a year ago was it built. Hu Zhongyuan explained proudly beside Zhongshou, following which he smiled. Unfortunately, the formation wasn't opened. If not, it would be even more majestic. Zhongshou curled his lips. If the formation was opened, then he wouldn't have any chance. The best method would be to immediately turn around and leave. However, thinking about it, with Hu Qianqiu and Qiu Wei's ability, they should be able to do that. Since the formation wasn't opened, then he had a 99% chance of winning. If not for him worrying about his image and knowing that he had to be careful in this battle, Zhongshou would have laughed out loud with his hands on his waist. With a slight thought, Zhongshou imitated the image of the heroes in TV dramas, pointing the horsewhip forward. His expression was really dark and sunken, giving off a domineering aura. Generals, who can bring me the head of this Dongshang lieutenant? The surroundings were instantly silent. After a long while, some sweat appeared on Zhongshou's head. The first time he acted cool. Why was there an awkward silence? Chapter 242. The surroundings were instantly silent. After a long while, some sweat appeared on Zhongshou's head. The first time he acted cool. Why was it so silent? Just as he was feeling really awkward, why didn't these people give him any face? Zhongshou heard a soft sobbing sound and looked over in shock, only to see Zhonggang and Hu Zhongyuan have complicated expressions, suddenly happy and suddenly sad. Even the surrounding soldiers of the Black Fox Iron Cavalry looked over in silence. Zhong Gang looked up into the sky, his eyes filled with tears as he muttered, so like, Jun Shang, do you see this from the heavens? The prince has inherited your style. At this moment, he is like you in the past. The cold sweat on Zhong Shou's face couldn't help but seep out. So his cheap father, Gantian Mountain Monster King Zhong Weiran, was so flashy in the past? Looking closely at the other few people, Tan Tao was silent. A weird glow flashed in Li Luo's eyes. Who knows what he was thinking about? Anyways, the gaze that he looked over made one's hair stand up. Did this fellow have a fetish for that? You really can't judge a book by its cover. After a moment of silence, Zhong Yuan suddenly rode his horse forwards. Although his expression was calm, his eyes were suppressing something. East City Capital Fong Su. This person has worked with Zhong Hao for many years as his deputy and is his most trusted person. Prince, please wait a moment. I will go and get his head. After he said that, he galloped away. When he passed by the cavalry in front of him, he casually snatched 10 over-iron spears and carried them on his back. Then, he led the way and galloped towards the city gates. When a mysterious armor-wind dragon cavalry saw that, they immediately followed closely behind Zhong Yuan. After the Ruohai Straits battle, these Xian Mountain City cavalry recognized Zhong Yuan much more than Tan Tao. At this moment, Zhong Gang was really secretive as he wiped away the tears at the corner of his eyes. Then, he urged his horse to leave as well, and said in a clear voice, I'm going to support Zhong Yuan. Today, I will definitely let those bastards in the city experience the might of my Black Fox Iron Cavalry. A bunch of trash dared to stop a chariot? You really don't know how to write the word death. Zhong Shou was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled silently and followed behind the group. Under the protection of Hu Zhongyuan and Li Luo, they continued to run. Zhong Yuan's horse was very fast. In just a few dozen breaths, they had arrived at the city gate. Then, he looked up with a cold gaze. Ever since he had comprehended the wild thunder spear intent, his idea could already spread out for several kilometers. He could clearly sense that the top of the city wall was empty. Most of the barracks at the back also faced the city. However, at this moment, the East City Army was obviously alerted and was mobilizing their troops to defend the city. Fong Su, the lieutenant general of the Eastern City, was already standing on the city wall. However, there were still very few people on either side of him. There were only 500 archers and 1,000 armored soldiers. This was why Zhong Yuan wasn't in a rush to go up the city wall, quietly stopping 7,000 feet away from the city gates and looking on coldly. This was the same person who had been on the same battlefield as Zhong Hao when his father had died in battle. Killing intent rose up in his heart, and he wanted to immediately attack and kill this person. However, after thinking about it for a moment, he forcefully suppressed it. Although he hated this person, he was under Zhong Shou now. He couldn't let his personal feelings affect official matters. The prince had treated him so well, so he had to think for him. He couldn't let himself do whatever he wanted. Even if he wanted to kill him, he had to do it properly. Till date, he remembered what his mother said before she died. In this life, he didn't let the heavens down, he didn't let the earth down, he didn't let his heart down. Taking in a deep breath, Zhong Yuan forced himself to calm down, focusing on that Fong Su. Is that East City Lieutenant Fong Su? The prince has returned to the mountain city and will arrive in a moment. Why aren't you opening the city gates? That Fong Su was around 40 years old. He was tall, and his body was a little fat. However, when the black scale armor covered in barbed spikes was draped over his body, his figure appeared as majestic as a mountain. He was originally looking down warily, but when he heard Zhong Yuan's words, he was startled. A moment later, he said hesitantly, You are Zhong Yuan? The man below the city walls was alone. His body was covered in blood cloud armor, and even his face was covered. If it wasn't for the voice being familiar, he wouldn't have recognized it. Rage instantly rose up in his chest. However, in the next moment, just as he was about to order people to attack, he felt a chill down his spine. Zhunshan Pass has you whooshing guarding it. How did you get over? Zhong Yuan laughed coldly, raising his eyelids. Yu Wuxing offended his superiors. Not only did he refuse to open the city gates, he plotted a rebellion and tried to harm the prince. 2 hours ago, he was killed by me. Fong Su, are you going to refuse to open the city gates? Fong Su's eyes constricted. The first thought in his head was disbelief. That Jinshan Pass Lieutenant Yu Wuxing's strength was actually a little stronger than his. Within the pass, there were 3 Xuanwu ancestors defending. With the help of the spiritual formation, there was also a return to Sun Realm Spirit Master from the Shui family. How could they break through? Did this Zhong Yuan lead 1,000,000 troops? However, even then, with how dangerous Jinshan Pass was, there was no way it couldn't last for 2 to 4 hours. Even till now, there wasn't any movement at all. However, when he saw the bloodstains on Zhong Yuan's body, he was shocked. In the night sky, the sound of hooves spread out from afar. Fong Su couldn't help but mutter and swallow his saliva. He didn't know what the fate of Jinshan Pass was like, but he knew that Zhong Yuan's battle record of killing 4 Xuanwu ancestors was real. Thinking about it slightly, he kept his thoughts of turning on Zhong Yuan, shaking his head. Zhong Yuan, my brother Zhong, how treated you well. Zhong Yuan's eyes didn't even waver, directly interrupting. After today's matter, I will find you to ask about my father's death 6 years ago. Fong Su's expression changed once more, taking in a deep breath until Zhong Yuan's eyes showed impatience. Only then did he open his mouth. It is already late at night, based on our Gantian mountain rules. Even the crown prince has to verify his identity before he can enter the city. Zhong Yuan gave out a mocking smile. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You know the situation in the city and still want to verify? You are delaying time and want to send a message to Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang? Do you think that I, Zhong Yuan, am a fool and will do as you wish? Those who betray the ruler and scheme will be killed. Just as Fong Su's face turned ashen white, Zhong Yuan had already leaped onto his horse and galloped. Like lightning, he galloped towards the city wall. The purple lightning spear pointed right at the city wall, killing intent rising into the heavens, the aura extremely sharp. In an instant, Fong Su's mind was shaken, and he subconsciously took a step back. The many soldiers and archers on the city wall couldn't take it. Being suppressed by the maniacal spear intent, a portion of them couldn't even raise their weapons. Maniac lightning spear intent. This Zhong Yuan actually comprehended the maniac lightning spear intent. Fong Su was a Xuanwu ancestor after all. His mind was startled for a moment before he came back to his senses. His chest was like a raging wave, surging unceasingly, following which he held a spear in his hand, biting his tongue and hollering, "Why aren't you waking up?" The roar was like that of a lion, causing the people around who were stunned by Zhong Yuan's spear intent to come back to their senses. However, another Xuanwu ancestor who was also stationed on the city wall, who was dressed as a deputy general, silently took a few steps back. The few martial ancestors around Fong Su all took out their weapons and blocked in front of Fong Su, wanting to form a formation to defend. However, in the next instance, Zhong Yuan suddenly stretched his hand behind his back, following which a long spear brought with it vast purple lightning, flashing over. It was so quick that even Fong Su couldn't react, just one spear piercing one of them to death. Fong Su's face was slightly ashen white, only to see that the flying spear was continuous, along with a sharp whistle as it was thrown over one by one. Pretty much every 100 feet, Zhong Yuan dashed forwards. He would throw out a spear, following which his body flew up. Without the city protecting spiritual formation blocking him, his current body was as quick as lightning. In an instant, he had already flown 300 feet high. In an instant, lightning filled the air, illuminating the area as if it was daytime. In front of his eyes, a 5-meridian earth chakra expert had his chest pierced. Then, the range expanded once again. The people around him were killed one after another in the span of a few dozen breaths. Even those at the martial ancestor realm didn't have any ability to block. In the next moment, Zhong Yuan's footsteps had already stepped onto the city wall. His cold eyes were like that of an eagle looking down at its prey from high above. Spear intent. It really is maniac lightning spear intent. At this moment, Fong Su only felt that he was about to collapse. A few days ago, he was still mocking those few Xuanwu ancestors of Yinxiao Mountain. Was Zhong Yuan, who was only at 4 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm, so terrifying? He couldn't even block one move from him? Only now did he realize that he was the laughable one. In that instance, it wasn't that he couldn't block those spears that shot over. However, he knew that the moment he moved, there might be a weakness. Those flying spears might turn towards him and take his life. How could other people's lives be more important than his own? However, at this moment, facing the spear attack that Zhong Yuan pointed over, Fong Su only felt despair. At this moment, his hatred filled the heavens. Blamed that Zhong Hao for being so meddlesome. If he had gotten rid of that bastard, there wouldn't be such a problem today. Purple lightning spear intent. 6 meridians of the Earth Chakra realm. Unparalleled, famous general. Such an enemy was actually raised by them. How ironic. Unfortunately, such a talent wasn't used by them in the end. In the next moment, Fong Su once again let out a low roar, finally suppressing the sliver of fear in his chest, and suddenly thrust his spear forward. No matter what, he was a Xuanwu ancestor after all. This spear was filled with all the strength in his body, like it was going to pierce through the heavens as it stabbed forward. Moments later, purple lightning covered the sky as the spear attack intersected with one another. His vision turned black, and intense pain spread out from his neck before he lost all his senses. Waving the purple lightning spear, it pierced through Fong Su's throat and sliced off his head. Zhong Yuan then looked towards another Xuanwu ancestor. He recognized this person. It was Deputy General Fong Su, called Suman. He was personally arranged by the ruler to be in the East Camp to restrict him. However, after the ruler disappeared, he became a mere figurehead. He retracted his killing intent and pointed a spear. Are you going to surrender or not? Chapter 243. That Suman's eyes flashed for a moment before he laughed out loud. I am the subject of the ruler, the subject of the prince. Where did the word surrender come from? He pulled out his knife, the snow-bright knife light flashing behind him. Tens of heads were tossed into the air, blood spurting out. Zhong Yuan took a look at these people, only to see that most of them were Fong Su's trusted aides. He didn't bother about them. Suman walked to the inner side of the city wall and hollered down. Are you all dead? The prince has returned. Why aren't you opening the gate? The 200 armored soldiers of the city gate below were first stunned, and then they all hurriedly carried away the few thick and heavy steel door bars one after another. After a few of them came back to their senses, they wanted to stop them. However, Suman jumped down and slashed with a knife, splitting their heads into two. In just a moment, the city gates were opened. A few breaths later, Zhong Gang led 2,000 cavalry and stepped into the city. Although they were below the city, they could sense Fong Su's corpse above. First, he patted Suman's shoulder and called him Old Su. Then he laughed out loud. What a purple lightning spear, Zhong Yuan. Even Fong Su died in your hands. The prince's eyes are sharp. He really didn't misjudge you. Zhong Yuan jumped down from the air, expressionlessly looking at Zhong Gang. He was too lazy to bother. After getting off the horse, he walked towards the city gates and half knelt down. Minister Zhong Yuan welcomes the prince back to the city. I didn't let you down and cut off Fong Su's head. Zhong Gang turned his head, only to see 1,000 feet away. Zhong Shou, Tan Tao, and the others were galloping towards the city gates. He waved his hand, and the 2,000 cavalry all got off their horses and half knelt down on the road. We welcome the prince back to the city. Around this area, there were many thousands of East City Army soldiers who had gathered here. When they saw the situation, they were at a loss and didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether they should charge up or kneel down with these people. Just as they were hesitating, they saw Zhong Gang and Zhong Yuan raise their heads, their knife-like gazes sweeping over. Oh! With a cold scoff, two extremely strong martial path intense suddenly pressed down on the area 10,000 feet around. Instantly, close to 90% of the soldiers couldn't hold on and fell to the ground. The remaining people's faces were also pale. Suman also half knelt along with Zhonggang and the others. His expression was one of shock. The 2,000 cavalrymen in front of him, whether it was the Black Fox Iron Cavalry or the mysterious Armor Wind Dragon Cavalry, were all elites among elites. However, such elite cavalry was always a thorn in the army. If they didn't have enough strength, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Even the Demon King City Lord couldn't win their respect. At this moment, most of them lowered their heads and didn't show any signs of unwillingness. He was well aware of Zhonggang's character, arrogant and untamed. Only when the ruler Zhong Weiran was there could he suppress him. Even if he was still loyal to the crown prince, he could not help but be arrogant. At this moment, he actually had a respectful expression on his face, and his eyes shone brightly. As for Zhong Yuan, he knew that this person was loyal to Zhong Hao and Zhong Yang. At this moment, for some reason, he actually joined the crown prince's side. A few days ago, during the Battle of Rawhide Straits, 3,000 iron cavalry trampled over 1,000 troops. Just thinking about it made one's blood boil. If it wasn't for him personally seeing Zhong Yuan, he would have killed Zhong Yuan. One spear to kill Fong Su. It was hard to believe that this kid had created such a terrifying battle record. Looking at his expression, he didn't have any unwillingness at all, and his expression was close to being sincere. Even in the past, when this kid listened to Zhong Hao, he didn't have such respect. Zhong Shou rode on that grade 4 warhorse that was armed to the teeth, swiftly passing through the doorway. Then, he was frightened by the thousands of people kneeling in front of him, as well as the cheers of them welcoming the crown prince. He was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. In an instant, he felt a surge of pride. Thinking to himself, no wonder people said that a man should be drunk and lie on a beauty's lap, sober, to control the world. This feeling of holding 1,000 troops in one's hands was intoxicating. From today onwards, he would control the entire Gantian mountain city. At that time, he might be able to unify Donglin Cloud Continent and even compete with the Central Continent God Emperor. A moment later, he shook his head and laughed involuntarily. It seemed like his goals weren't as firm as he thought. During these few days, he only grasped a little bit of power, and it nearly wavered. He couldn't help but take in a deep breath, trying his best to calm himself down. At this moment, he was still that small librarian 10,000 years later. He had once dominated his entire life, tossing aside all the fame and fortune to seclude himself in the library where he worked in the past, just to have a quiet place to study the sword path and the sword theories of the 100 schools of thought, to build a solid foundation to pursue the pinnacle of the martial path. Although his current body wasn't Tan Xiao, but the Monster King's son, Zhong Shou, what he wanted still didn't change. Today, he came back to take the position of Monster King to complete the wishes of the person in front of him. His hand suddenly grasped the lightning-winged sword by his waist. Zhong Shou smiled to himself, feeling at ease in his heart. This was his foundation. Many thoughts flashed in his mind, but in just a moment, Zhong Shou came back to his senses. He waved his right hand to signal for everyone to get up. Then, he faced Suman. Out of all the East City Army soldiers, only this person wore the deputy capital robe. His status was the highest, and his strength was also the strongest. Recalling in his mind, although Zhong Shou was young when he left, he had memories of all the Xuanwu ancestors and above. In just a moment, Zhong Shou recognized the identity of this person. You are Suman? East City Army Deputy Capital Commander? How is the situation in the city? That Suman was also an experienced person. After cupping his fist toward Zhong Shou, he replied really simply, Young Master Zhong Yang, Zhong Shi, Zhong Shuan, and the others are in the Chongzheng Hall at the peak of the mountain. They rang the meeting bell 9 times to summon people for a meeting. However, to date, apart from their trusted subordinates, no one has responded. Overlord Duke and Xiao Tingzhu are in Zheng'an Peak. Although they control 470,000 troops in the city, more than those traitors by 100,000. However, they're afraid of breaking the vases and don't dare to act rashly. Both sides are facing off at the south of the city. All right, vast country Duke Chai Yuan. For some reason, he didn't go to the Chongzheng Hall. However, the 80,000 martial cultivators of the Wind Bear race in the city are also mobilized. Vast country Duke Chai Yuan. Zhong Shou squinted his eyes and instantly roughly guessed the situation within the city. His eyes moved about as he swept around. The East City Army has 5 towns. Along with the supporting troops, there are 60,000 troops. How long does Capital Commander Su need to make these people work for me? When Suman heard that, he didn't understand. Since he had already returned to the city, then why didn't he meet up with Hu Qianxiu and Xiu Wei to head to the Chongzheng Hall together? At that time, they would be able to settle everything. One must know that although Zhong Shi and the others worked together, they weren't of one mind. As for the hundreds of thousands of troops gathered, most of them were forced to follow. Zhong Shou, as the rightful ruler, only needed the help of important officials. With a shout, he would be able to gather half of them. Why did they have to waste time in the East City? Were they worried about the experts sent by Daoming sect and Xuanzu sect? However, now that the situation was settled, would these people dare to attack Gantian Mountain City? After a moment of hesitation, Suman said in a resolute tone, 15 minutes. The 4th town of the East City Army has been under my control from start to finish. In just 15 minutes, I will be able to take control of the 2nd and 3rd towns. The other 2 town commanders are all loyal to Feng Su and need the prince to send people to act. His eyes were looking at Zhong Gang and Zhong Yuan. Zhong Shou didn't reply, looking at the tall mountain in deep thought. The main peak of Gantian Mountain was 12,000 feet tall. The secondary peak was Zhongang Peak, which was 9,700 feet tall. At this moment, Gantian Mountain City was filled with darkness and silence. Only these 2 mountain peaks were brightly lit. Then, his lips curled up in an enigmatic manner. This situation was several times better than what he had imagined. He looked at the Wind Bear race in his memory, especially where the Chai Yuan race lived. He seemed to have thought of a way. The battle today seemed to have a higher chance of winning. On the peak of Zhongang Peak, Hu Qianxiu grinned and laughed maniacally. As expected from the prince, you didn't disappoint me. You actually broke through Jinshan Pass. This is half a day earlier than I expected. Your ability is really amazing. Your first move is lightning quick. You have the style of the ruler. That person is Purple Lightning Spear Zhong Yuan. Although they were tens of miles away, when Xiu Wei focused his energy into his eyes, he could still see the situation tens of miles away. Just now, he had personally witnessed how Zhong Yuan used the lightning spear sense to behead Feng Su with one spear. This person was indeed worthy of being the legendary, unparalleled General Seed. Although it was shocking that Jinshan Pass was broken through, with this person there seemed to be a chance. With this person here, it was the prince's fortune. Who knows what methods the prince used to make this person willingly serve him. This shock only lasted for a moment. When he looked out and saw that the person who rode into the city was the prince whom he hadn't seen in 3 years. Xiu Wei instantly relaxed. As expected, it is the prince. It is good that he is back. Those clowns are asking to die. The most important thing is to send people to escort the prince to meet up with us. Just as he said that, he was startled, only to see that at the East City Gate, the close to 10,000 troops that followed Zhong Shou into the city didn't move towards Gantian Mountain City. Instead, they rested for a moment before splitting up. They moved towards the few towns of the East City Army. What was the meaning of that? Xiu Wei found it weird. Since he returned to the city, he should work together with everyone to settle the Monster King position. With the ruler and subject position, Zhong Shi and the others wouldn't be able to cause any waves. What Zhong Yuan did just now, killing Feng Su when he was caught off guard, was an exception. Now that the other party was on guard, those generals would definitely be extremely careful and heavily protect them. Furthermore, it wasn't like Zhong Shi didn't have any experts under him. At this moment, even if he could control 50,000 more East City Army, it wouldn't be of much use. Now that he was afraid of breaking the vases, Even if he had more troops, it would be useless. Instead, it would give the enemy more time to react, which wasn't a smart move. Just as he didn't understand and frowned, he suddenly heard Hu Qianqiu beside him laugh. Zhong Shi and those few brats ran out from within. I knew they wouldn't be able to sit still. Zhou Wei followed Hu Qianqiu's gaze and looked out. As expected, Zhong Shi and the others were at the edge of the mountain peak, looking down. The night sky was dark, but one could still see the ugly expressions of these people. Chapter 244. It's Zhong Shou. I saw him 3 years ago. He looks similar, just that he is a little bigger. With Zhong Gang and Hu Zhongyuan following by his side, it shouldn't be wrong. The person beside him should be Purple Lightning Spear Zhongyuan. That's right. To kill Fang Su, he only used one spear. This kid really comprehended maniac lightning spear sense. On the mountain peak, there was a huge discussion. Zhong Shi clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles giving out a series of cracking sounds. However, the sound was really soft and hidden in his sleeves. His expression didn't change. Other people couldn't see clearly and only thought that this young Master Zhong Shi was really confident and calm. However, his chest was filled with shock, and he couldn't control himself. In that instance, he thought that Zhong Xiuan had other intentions and did something. However, when he looked over expressionlessly, he saw that Zhong Shou's face was ashen white, and he looked like he had lost his soul. Thinking about it carefully, a few months ago he had already pulled Yu Wuxing to his side. Since the Shui family wanted to have a marriage alliance with him, they had already started to lean towards him. Only then did his suspicions slowly disappear. Zhong Shi could keep calm, while Zhong Ming beside him was furious, his expression dark and sunken as he looked behind him. I want to know how this Zhong Shou returned to Gantian Mountain City. Didn't you say that he needed at least a day before he could return? Zhong Ming looked at a man in a brocade robe, a martial master peak with 6 meridians of the earth chakra level. However, under Zhong Ming's gaze, he was covered in cold sweat. He bowed and explained, roughly 3 days ago, my subordinates found out that Zhong Shou and Zhong Gang were west of Gulong Forest Ocean. They led 2,000 elite cavalry into the forest and then disappeared. Black Fox Iron Cavalry all cultivate spells and are best at illusionary techniques and hiding techniques. Even if people want to chase them, it would be as tough as ascending to the heavens. However, based on their speed, even if they went all out, they would need a day to reach Gantian Mountain. Zhong Ming's expression changed. Then he snorted coldly and took a big step forward to slap the battalion commander of the Mounted Scout Battalion. However, just as he was about to kick him away, Zhong Shi shook his head and said expressionlessly, "Uncle, don't be angry." This person was conscientious in his duty. What he said was right. It's not his fault. However, in his chest, it was as if there were raging waves. West of the ancient Wave Forest Sea, that wouldn't be wrong. To be able to rush here at such a time, one must have come from the Jinshan Pass. How did Zhong Shou and the others get here? He remembered that half a day ago, he had contacted Yu Wuxing. Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't believe that these people would be able to take down the impregnable pass in less than half a day. Could it really have grown wings and flown across the Evil Spirit Ravine? 10,000 feet away, he could feel 2 gazes filled with disdain looking over from heaven-suppressing peak. Zhong Shi's vital energy couldn't help but flow in reverse, rage attacking his heart. He was originally filled with confidence. However, along with Zhong Shou's sudden return, he started to feel uneasy. Then he laughed coldly. So what if he came back? His plans were enough to beat him into a bottomless abyss, unable to climb back up. He originally wanted to show mercy, but at this moment, his violent intent exploded. Tens of miles away, with the buffs of the spirit masters and spells, he looked at the situation within the city. Then, he looked at Zhong Shou's neck. His thoughts were even colder. These old troops of Zhong Weiran really wanted to do things the hard way. Did they really think that a person with no martial path or spiritual cultivation could sit on the Monster King position? If it wasn't for him having worries in his heart, he could casually crush him to death. However, the current situation was good. If he became the Monster King, the first thing he would do would be to kill this Zhong and hang his head for 3 months. He would totally wipe out the thoughts of some people and also break the arrogance of these old troops of Zhong Weiran. Even if the entire Gantia Mountain city split up and caused huge losses to their strength, he wouldn't care. Since no matter how he tried to recruit them, they couldn't be used by him, then why not get rid of them early on? He didn't believe that these people wouldn't care about the lives of their people. With that thought made up, Zhongshu's eyes once again showed calmness, only with a little more viciousness. Tens of miles away, that ant-sized Zhongshu was already a dead person in his eyes. You don't have to worry. This Zhongshu coming back might not be a bad thing. No, I should say that it's what I want. Just now, were we worried that Hu Zhongyuan and the others wouldn't come to this Chongzhen Hall? If these people don't come, how can we wipe them all out? It's just a little problematic at the start, and it isn't a big problem. When he heard that, Zhong Ming's eyes lit up once more, showing a deep thought. As for Zhong Hao and Ling Feikong, their eyes were filled with fear as they looked towards Zhongshu. The talent of this future Monster King was indeed something that one feared. Zhongshu rushing back at such a time, if it was anyone else, they would be at a loss. However, Zhong Ming instantly thought of the advantages and also calmed the hearts of the troops. Even if everyone knew that the situation wasn't as simple as what Zhongshu said, they still felt slightly more at ease. However, Fang Su has already died and the East City army will be tough to control. In the end, our momentum is still too weak. Tilting his head and taking a deep breath, Zhongshu suddenly smiled towards Zhong Ming. Uncle, please make a trip to the Chai family. Persuade Uncle Chai Yuan. If this Gantia Mountain city is really destroyed, it won't be good. Gantia Mountain in my hands. Even if we can't dominate the world, we can still protect ourselves. It's better than falling into the hands of Zhongshu, that trash. Once today's matter is settled, I will give their Wind Bear race a city. Also, third uncle, I know that you are close to the Lin and Fong families. I'm afraid I need to trouble you. Just as he was speaking with Zhong Hao, he thought to himself that after Zhongshu entered the city, he chose to stop at the East City Gate. That was really stupid, only to see the surroundings suddenly become silent. Zhongshu was startled as he looked down once more, only to see the 5 towns troops stationed near the East City Gate suddenly form up and start to move north along the main path. They were extremely quick. In just a moment, they had pushed forward close to 2 miles. Along with the 10,000 that Zhongshu brought, a total of 70,000 troops were marching towards the North City. Why did this Zhongshu send troops to the North City? The most important area of Gantian Mountain City was the South City. If he wanted to meet up with that Hu Qianxiu and Xiu Wei, he had to go to the North City. Just as he was feeling weird, Zhongshu's eyes suddenly stopped at a place. That place was the place where the Wind Bear clan lived. It was also where Chai Yuan's house was. His brows furrowed as he thought about it, but he still couldn't understand. In the end, he could only shake his head and laugh involuntarily. This Zhongshu was just too weird, actually making him a little suspicious. Could it be that he also wanted a rope in Chai Yuan? But this Wind Bear race leader didn't have enough trump cards and benefits, so how would he be so easily convinced? Gantia Mountain City took up a huge amount of land. 70,000 cavalry troops walked from the east to the north. It also took them nearly 2 hours to cover the distance of more than 3 miles. Along the way, Zhong Gang and a few of them recruited many scattered people. They were also ordered by Zhongshu to spread out and forcefully recruit the people of the various races. Be it old or weak, strong or strong, women or children, they were all captured. When they finally reached their destination, 60,000 troops had swelled to 200,000. In front of them was where the Wind Bear race gathered. The 80,000 Bear race soldiers in the distance also felt that something wasn't right. They all took up the main path and waited solemnly. Zhong Gang and Suman, who led the troops, didn't advance. In an orderly manner, they commanded the army to set up formations here. The few of them were all really experienced. Although their troops were temporarily under them, even the East City Army, which was the main force, had been cleaned up not long ago. However, it was still neat and orderly, as if it was a model. Besides Zhongshu, there were only Zhong Yuan, Tan Tao, Hu Zhongyuan, and Li Luo. Tan Tao was an outsider. The former led close to 10,000 elite cavalry. Hu Zhongyuan and Li Luo were the leaders of the close bodyguards. From tens of thousands of people, they chose 1,000 strong and firm soldiers to protect Zhongshu, including the Black Fox Iron Cavalry and Iron Armor Wind Dragon Cavalry. There were close to 10,000 of them. They were all well-trained and equipped with elite armor. However, it was obvious that the Wind Bear Race Private Army gave off a much stronger aura. There were only 80,000 of them, but they were all close to 10 feet tall. Their muscles were tight, and they were really muscular. However, at this moment, Hu Zhongyuan didn't care much. Instead, he was worried for him. "Prince, this doesn't seem good, right? This move is too vicious. In the future, we will see each other often." Tan Tao frowned, looking at this fellow in disdain. "How is that vicious? On the battlefield, one naturally has to be unscrupulous." The Crown Prince was truly wise. If you don't have lightning-fast methods, how can you suppress these large races? Hu Zhongyuan wasn't happy, scoffing coldly. "You aren't from Gantian Mountain, so naturally, you don't have to care." Zhongshu couldn't help but roll his eyes, acting like he didn't hear the argument beside him. He stood on top of a 4-story building and looked into the distance. When a rumbling sound rose up, his eyes lit up. He knew that the front had already attacked, only to see dust and dirt flying up. The laborers that they had captured were being threatened by the supporting troops. They started to forcefully tear down houses one by one. No matter what buildings they were all leveled. Hundreds of thousands of people working together in just 15 minutes. Just like that, all the houses in this area were leveled. They cleared out a large piece of land, coincidentally exposing the habitat of the Wind Bear race to Zhong Yuan's close to 10,000 cavalry. Close to 10,000 armored soldiers brought over the siege chariots, ballistae, cannons, etc., and assembled them one by one. The 12,000 archers of the East Camp Army all lit up fire arrows and placed them on their bows, ready to fire. When Zhongshu saw the situation, he touched his chin in satisfaction and looked at the sky. It's the southeast wind, just nice to set fire and kill people. Just as he was about to give the order, he heard a roar from afar, "Stop!" Zhongshu's brows furrowed as he looked into the distance, only to see that within the formation of the Wind Bear Race Private Army, an unusually muscular person was walking out with a few followers. Chapter 245. Zhongshu also recognized this person. Similar to Hu Qinxiu, he had a deep impression of him. Wind Bear Race leader Chai Yuan. Within Gantian Mountain City, he was ranked 4th after Hu Qinxiu and Xiu Wei. His body was like a mountain, his energy like an ocean. Stepping out from the formation, even from 10,000 feet away, it caused Zhong Yuan and the others beside him to turn serious. There were a few people beside him, 2 young Wind Bear Race males. They should be the juniors of Chai Yuan. Their strength wasn't weak. There was another person around 40 years old who looked handsome. Although his cultivation was high, he still had some fox race traits. It was the Sky Fox Race Grand Elder Zhongming. At this moment, he was looking over with a dark and shocked gaze. Although he tried his best to keep calm on his face, from his slightly trembling hands, one could see that he was feeling nervous and uneasy. Chai Yuan looked around like a tiger. Even if he opened his mouth to ask them to stop, the other side didn't have any intentions of stopping. It was still a group of armored soldiers who stepped in an orderly manner, following the leveled ruins and slowly getting closer. More war machines were being assembled. There were actually a few mobile trebuchets, which were moved over by the East City Army. Chai Yuan was furious, but he suppressed it. His gaze directly pierced towards the building Zhongshu was in. "Is the prince here? Can you meet with Chai Yuan for a chat?" Zhongshu smiled and didn't hesitate. He directly went downstairs, riding his horse and heading in front of the army formation. However, he didn't get too close. He stood still about 4,000 feet away from the other party. Chai Yuan's expression was really complicated as he sized up Zhong Shou. Suddenly he felt bad. Suddenly he sighed. Suddenly he pitied. Suddenly he felt regret. A moment later he retracted all his emotions and opened his mouth once more. The prince has led the army here, tens of thousands of people pulling their swords out. What are your intentions? Naturally, it is to have a battle with you. Zhong Shou smiled, replying without hesitation. If I can win, then I will set fire and kill, wiping out the wind bear race. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire area fell silent. Even the soldiers on Zhong Shou's side were stunned. A green energy flashed on Chai Yuan's face. The two people behind him were furious. Just as they were about to charge forward, they were stopped by Chai Yuan. The last bit of warmth in the eyes of the wind bear race leader retreated, filled with anger and indifference as he cupped his fists. My wind bear race is part of Gantian Mountain. We're the subjects of the late ruler. In the 10 years of the previous ruler's campaign in the west of the Cloud Continent, countless men of my race died, and I don't know how much we contributed. I wonder what reason the prince has, and what authority does he have to exterminate my wind bear clan? Aren't you afraid that the other races will be disappointed? You're the minister of the late emperor. The wind bear clan has indeed made outstanding contributions. But what does this have to do with me, Zhong Shou? Zhong Shou sneered lazily and retorted. As for the reason, I, Zhong Shou, don't need any reason. I only know that your wind bear race won't be used by me. You're the arms of Zhong Shou. To kill a leader, you have to cut off his wings and break his limbs. There are so many precedents in these 10,000 years. What does Uncle Chai think? Since you are my subjects, why do you have to worry? As for the matter of having the right to be disappointed, that is preposterous. That Chai Yuan was startled, his expression distracted. Only after tens of breaths did he recover. He scoffed coldly, his hand pressing on the giant axe hanging by the side of the horse, coldly saying, You were able to recruit Zhong Shou and cause so much chaos in Jiafu City, earning tens of times more beast crystals. I originally thought that you had some ability, but it is just so-so. In the 3 years in Linhai College, you only learned some vicious methods. Ignorant kid, do you know how many people will die in the city once the war starts? Millions of people fighting. Is it enough to destroy the Gantian Mountain your father left? Within the 5 provinces, how many cities will take the chance to stand on their own? My wind bear race isn't a race that can be trampled on by others. You want to attack my wind bear clan with just this motley crew of over 80,000? What a joke. So Uncle Chai also knows that this Gantian Mountain is what father left behind. Zhong Shou broke out into a laugh, thinking to himself that this was a typical case of only allowing officials to kill and set fires, but not allowing commoners to light up their houses. Did these people think that he would be afraid of breaking the vases? That Zhong Shou would threaten him with destroying the city? Expressionlessly shaking his head, the mocking intent in Samaran's voice was thick. If I wasn't the Monster King, what does this Gantian Mountain having or not have to do with me? Zhong Shou? If I could ascend the throne, at most I would just rebuild it. Father is really watching from the heavens. Even if Gantian Mountain is destroyed in my hands, he wouldn't be angry with me. On the contrary, if this base is stolen by others because Zhong Shou is useless, Father would be furious. Uncle Chai, don't you think that makes sense? Seeing the expressions of the few of them fluctuate between green and white, Zhong Shou's tone turned expressionless. I only have 80,000 soldiers and might not be the opponent of your wind bear race. However, I will go all out to drain the blood of your race, every drop of blood, no matter if you're strong, old or weak. I want you all to be exiled, to have no place to stand. I want you to have no face to meet your wind bear race ancestors after you die. I don't care if you call me ruthless or ignorant. Anyways, before I die, Zhong Shou will go all out to achieve it. Chai Yuan's expression changed. An extremely deep chill instantly struck his entire body. Even the 2 people behind him lost their anger, only leaving ashen white faces. Chai Yuan's hand unknowingly released the handle of the axe. He kept silent for a moment before taking in a deep breath. Is the prince serious? You really don't care about the lives of the city? I can't be more serious. Zhong Shou yawned, seemingly really tired as he patted the shoulder of Zhong Yuan beside him. Uncle Chai, why don't we have a bet? My cousin's 10,000 elite cavalry can drain the blood of your Windbear race. He waved the reins and turned the horse around. I'll give you 100 breaths of time. Whether you choose to wipe out your race or chop off that Zhong Ming's head and give it to me and make me your ruler is up to you. Whether or not to fight, Uncle Chai can decide. Zhong Ming's face instantly drained of all blood, ashen white like paper. His eyes were filled with fear. 30 minutes ago, he was still delighted that he had finally convinced Chai Yuan to help, boasting that he had a silver tongue. 30 minutes later, this Zhong Shou had easily caused him to fall into despair, using strength to suppress him and threatening him with death. How is this Zhong Shou so vicious? Chai Yuan's expression changed once more, killing intent exploding out. However, when he saw Zhong Gang, who was laughing coldly, as well as Zhong Yuan and Li Luo, who were fully alert, his heart turned ice cold. Zhong Gang's strength was on the same level as his. Along with purple lightning spear Zhong Yuan, it was enough to beat him and Zhong Ming working together. Apart from that, the 7 Meridian middle-aged man beside Zhong Shou also seemed to have great strength. That's right, purple lightning spear. This was an unparalleled general seed. A few days ago, he personally led 3,000 iron cavalry to trample over 1,000 troops. At this moment, he was leading the more elite and stronger Black Fox iron cavalry. The cavalry under him had also increased to 10,000. Although this was an alley battle, who knows if their Windbear race could block it? He was startled as he looked at the back of Zhong Shou. This prince's methods were really different from his father's. His methods were vicious and firm. Who knows what level he would reach in the future? What was amusing was that they only thought that Gantian Mountain would have a bad future in the hands of Zhong Shou. However, they forgot that this prince also had the ability to destroy Gantian Mountain City. Zhong Shou threatened to flip the table, but this prince directly attacked. Even if the table flipped, he didn't care at all. Hesitating for a moment, Chai Yuan seemed to have lost all his energy as he said, "Prince, don't leave. My Windbear race is willing to stay neutral today." Zhong Shou scoffed coldly, not showing any intentions of turning his head. Chai Yuan sighed, getting off the horse and bowing. "This matter is really important. Can the prince give my race some time to consider?" Zhong Shou didn't care and returned to the formation. When Zhong Gang saw that, he laughed out loud. Hu Zhongyuan always sucked up to him, saying that the prince was wise and strong. He always looked down on him. At this moment, for the first time, he felt that those words made sense. His heart was filled with joy and joy. To be able to make Chai Yuan lower his head was really rare. Zhong Gang directly waved his long knife and pointed forwards. There are still 80 breaths. Today, if your Windbear race doesn't surrender, your race will be wiped out. Are you going to surrender or fight? Those tens of thousands of soldiers were originally a little nervous. However, when they saw that the private army of the Windbear race was slowly starting to panic, their morale rose and they roared out. Your Windbear race, if you don't surrender, your race will be wiped out. Are you going to surrender or fight? The shouts of tens of thousands of people spread out tens of miles. Chai Yuan closed his eyes, hiding the bitterness in his eyes. In the end, he sighed. "Prince, please report. This Zhong Ming is an elder of the Sky Fox King race, and is also a guest of our Chai family. I can't bear to and don't dare to kill him. Today I can only capture him and let the prince deal with him." As his voice fell, Chai Yuan abruptly pulled out his axe, and a bright axe light directly chopped towards the direction behind him. Zhong Ming was already prepared, and he immediately leaped up. His body turned into tens of illusionary images as he swiftly fled into the distance. In midair, tens of whip shadows slashed out, locking down hundreds of feet around. However, the 2 young bear race people behind Chai Yuan also waved their axes. The axe glow slashed out, slicing off a large portion of the illusionary images. They also sliced off several tens of feet long whips. Chai Yuan scoffed coldly. Wind wrapped around his body as he chased after Zhong Ming's body. At the tip of the axe, there was a strong suction force that affected Zhong Ming's body. Who knows how many axes he waved out in midair? The people around could only feel the blade shadows flashing randomly, energy seeping out as numerous broken whips fell to the ground. When the sky full of whip shadows and axe lights were all wiped out, Chai Yuan had already captured Zhong Ming in his hand and then stepped 1,000 feet forwards. Only then did he half kneel in front of the two armies. Minister Chai Yuan surrenders. The Wind Bear race was the subject of the late ruler and will be the subject of the prince in the future. Chapter 246. Hearing Chai Yuan's voice, Zhong Shou was delighted, his lips curling up. As expected, these people were amusing. Did they really think that he wouldn't kill them all? Zhong Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. In the end, the situation didn't develop in the worst direction, following which he was delighted. He forced the Chai family and Wind Bear race to surrender. The strength of Zhong Shou's men would explosively increase once more. They had a 70% chance of winning the Monster King battle today. Zhong Shou didn't think too much about it, heading in the direction of Chai Yuan once more. He wasn't afraid that this person would suddenly turn on him. If he really wanted to attack, he wasn't afraid of using Chai Yuan's head to show his might. Even if he knew that he was Zhong Weiron's old subject, he didn't care much. He was always clear about who was friend and foe. Within the Wind Bear race, it wasn't that there weren't any other branches that he could support. Zhong Yuan and Li Luo were really careful, being wary of Chai Yuan causing trouble. However, when the group of them arrived in front of the Wind Bear race leader, Vast Country Duke, they saw that Chai Yuan was totally dejected, like his heart was dead. Hu Zhongyuan couldn't help but grin, his heart pitying him. He knew that Chai Yuan was always proud. This time being forced to surrender by Zhong Shou was a huge blow to him. Zhong Shou was too lazy to bother about him. Looking at Zhong Ming, who was thrown to the ground. This person's chakra meridians and acupoints were indeed sealed, but he could still speak. Seeing Zhong Shou walk over, his tone was dark and sunken. "Prince, why aren't you letting me go? I am the great elder of the sky, Fox Zhong family." "Zhong Shou, you are just a prince. As long as you don't inherit the Monster King position, I can take care of you. Is this how you meet your elders? Who knows how Zhong Weiran taught you? How arrogant and unfilial. No respect for your elders." Zhong Shou was speechless, thinking to himself that this fellow didn't know his situation. Looking left and right, Zhong Gang and Li Luo all frowned, obviously disgusted by it. Looking at the people in front of him, killing intent was slowly seeping out. In the end, Zhong Ming did not dare to provoke Zhong Shou too much. After cursing for a while, he knew that Zhong Shou had no intention of letting him go. Thus, he turned to persuade Chai Yuan. As he struggled, he shouted, "Brother Chai, why aren't you doing it? With your strength, killing this vile creature within 10 steps is more than enough." Was he really going to let this trash inherit Gantian Mountain? At that time, both your Wind Bear Chai clan and my Heavenly Fox Zhong clan will fall into decline. If we get rid of this evil creature as soon as possible, then nothing will happen. Zhong Shou did not get angry when he was called a bastard by Zhong Ming. He looked at the two silently. Chai Yuan still had his head lowered. It was unknown what he was thinking, but he had no intention of attacking. Only then did he sigh regretfully, pulling out the lightning-winged sword from its sheath. Zhong Ming was startled, following which he seemed to have realized something. His expression changed as he scolded out, "Zhong Shou, you dare to kill me? I am an elder of the Zhong clan, your uncle. I am innocent. No one can kill me. You bastard, if you dare to touch a finger of mine and kill your family for no reason, you can forget about inheriting the race leader position. Above me, there is still Uncle Zhong who will use the family law. Zhong clan race leader? For no reason?" Zhong Shou smiled when he heard that, not bothering at all. He drove the horse over, directly slicing down with a sword. With a crisp cracking sound, it caused Zhong Ming's body to be split into two, his head flying. Chai Yuan abruptly raised his head and watched with incomparable astonishment as the head flew up, then fell down and rolled several meters on the ground. He didn't expect Zhong Shou to be so decisive when killing someone, following which he had an idea as he looked at Zhong Yuan's corpse. Although the strength of this Zhong clan elder was far from his, he was still an Earth Chakra 8 Meridian, and his skin was as tough as steel. Anyone below Mythic Master, even if they allowed them to hack at him, they wouldn't be able to do anything. This head was broken so cleanly, and the cut was so clean. Either the prince's strength had reached a certain realm, or he had a sharp blade in his hand. However, he didn't think much about it. With a dual meridian body, even if he could cultivate, it would be tough for him to achieve much. Zhong Shou's gaze looked over once more. Chai Yuan sighed once more. My Wind Bear race's 80,000 soldiers are willing to follow the prince's orders. However, the prince should know that a corner dog will jump over a wall. Young Master Zhong Shi has the help of Daoming's sect and Xuanzu's sect, as well as the Shui Family Marriage Alliance. If he is forced, no matter what, he will do it. As they say, take a step back and you'll have a better view. When Zhong Shi heard that, he shook his head in disappointment. It seems like Chai Yuan's heart was still on that fellow's side. However, he was too lazy to care about what he thought. He wasn't willing to listen anymore, directly interrupting, a mocking smile appearing at the corner of his lips. Stop talking. Compromising won't work on me. Even if he wants to go all out against me and drag the entire Gantia Mountain down, he needs to have the ability. I will give you 8 minutes to send your entire Chai family to me. 15 minutes later, I need them from your private army. Take out 60,000 soldiers to follow me to the Ling family in the west. Chai Yuan's brows rose up. Sending his family over as hostages wasn't surprising. However, the last few sentences shocked him the most, following which he felt even colder as he mocked himself. Since the other party could think of subduing him, how would he not think of the following ending? Zheng'an peek, just as Chai Yuan captured Zhongming. On the stone platform, it was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Hu Qinxiu and Qiu Wei were startled on the spot. The guards behind them were also stunned, standing on the spot. They all looked below in disbelief. The prince's methods are really sharp and decisive, unexpected. When the bloodlight floated up, tens of miles away, Zhong Shi chopped off Zhongming's head with one sword. Qiu Wei sucked in a cold breath, a weird glow flashing in his eyes. If he didn't surrender, he would directly die with the enemy. How bold. Maybe the prince can't cultivate, but with his strategic nature, he could be the king of a city, an army, a country. Do we die today or tomorrow? We don't need to think about this choice. Even I have to take a step back. Even if Gantian Mountain is going to be wiped out in a few months, we can have a few more months to prepare. Zhong sure saw through me, but didn't our prince see through them too? Hu Qinxiu still underestimated Zhong. Hu Qinxiu said, while thinking to himself that he couldn't cultivate, that might not be the case. He couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. Who knows when Zhong Shi would come back? Only then would he let these old officials know how terrifyingly wrong they were. Opening his mouth and revealing his tiger teeth, Hu Qinxiu shook his head. Stop talking nonsense. Looking at the situation, our prince isn't prepared to talk to Zhong Shi and the others. He will directly sweep over and destroy their foundations. I like this method. Too overbearing. Qiu Wei nodded slightly. Chai Yuan has surrendered. Then the next one is the Ling family of the Eye Wolf race. Apart from surrendering to the prince, they have no other choice. Gantian Mountain, 4 families. 3 of them have surrendered to the prince. The Zhong family just needs a message from the prince to cause them to split up. The remaining ones won't be a problem. Although it hasn't ended, the victory is already decided. I'll go and deploy the troops and have them assist him with all their might. After he finished, he didn't stay any longer. He took large strides down the mountain like a shooting star. Hu Zhongyuan smiled and was about to follow closely behind. He suddenly stopped and looked at the person opposite him, thinking that the person opposite him was probably in a bad mood. Right? That kid called Zhong Shi, who asked him to be arrogant. He originally thought that the prince needed to show off his spirit-connected martial path to be able to scare everyone. In the end, the moment he returned, he smashed everyone with a stick. In the end, it was such an outcome. On the opposite Gantian mountain peak, Zhongshe wasn't just having a bad time, he was feeling really bad. His heart was filled with so much anger that he was about to spit out blood. Just as the East City army spread out, he had already guessed Zhongshe's intentions. However, it was too late. Even if he guessed it, he couldn't turn the situation around. At this moment, the attitudes and expressions of the people around all changed drastically. Liu Jichong and Wu Yezhiren both frowned tightly. The latter was still okay as he was a senior master. Only the love of his eyes had disappeared by a lot. The former took several steps back and stopped looking at him. That Zhong Hao looked over with a smile that wasn't a smile, bringing with it a little bit of coldness. In Zhong Yang's eyes, there was a hint of schadenfreude and provocation. Zhongshe couldn't help but clench his fists, his fingernails digging deep into his flesh. Did this father and son think that with his uncle Zhongming dead, he had no one to rely on in the family? Did they think that if he lost, they could live alone? That Zhongshe and Zhongyuan would let them go? He only felt rage attacking his heart, wanting to slap Zhong Hao and Zhong Yang's faces. However, he didn't dare to. Tens of years of confidence had all collapsed. The thing he regretted the most now was asking Zhongming to persuade Chai Yuan. If he knew that this would happen, even if he lost, he could have left some trump cards. He had underestimated that trash. Who knew that the root of the problem would be so vicious? Suddenly, a long sigh spread out in his ear. Zhongshe suddenly turned around. When he looked out, he saw that Ling Feikong had already turned around, his sleeves fluttering as he walked down the mountain path. Zhong Hao's eyes instantly turned sharp as he stepped forwards. Where his brother Ling prepared to go? Where to go? Do you still need to ask? Naturally, to return to my Ling family. Since that prince can force Chai Yuan to surrender, why would he let my wolf race go? He didn't turn around to defend. Ling Feikong said expressionlessly, "Today we have already lost. There is no point in me staying here. If Brother Zhong Hao wants to attack, please do so." However, at that time, Ling Feikong would go all out. Zhong Hao's face turned green. After hesitating for a moment, he didn't attack. Only his eyes shone with a weird glow. Following which he brought Zhong Hao and followed Ling Feikong down the mountain. On the other side, Zhong Xiuan didn't hesitate. With a somewhat mocking smile, he also walked away with large strides. Along with these few people leaving, the atmosphere of the Gantian mountain peak was unusually suppressive. Zhongshe's face was ashen white. He was startled and didn't speak. He didn't want to bother about the change in mentality of the few people behind him. He only felt bitter, laughing at himself. A moment ago, he was so confident, but in just a moment, the building was about to collapse. His heart moved, fighting intent burning once more in his chest. He still hadn't lost today. He still had a chance. To be continued. Chapter 247. Just as it was silent, Liu Jichong suddenly coughed, his expression a little unnatural. "Apologies, young master Zhongshe. Now that the situation has changed, their chances of winning are set. Our Xuanzu sect won't participate in this Gantian Mountain Monster King battle. Our previous agreement will be nullified. Naturally, we will not ask the Crown Prince for our previous investment." Wu Yezhiren hesitated slightly before opening his mouth with much difficulty. "Sure, we have already lost. You are really smart and naturally know how to give up. You can leave with me and return to senior brother. Once you join our Daoming sect, a few years later you can become a direct disciple. You also want to rise up." "Leave?" Zhongshe laughed coldly, filled with disdain. His expression was dark and cold, filled with venom as he stared right at Zhongshe. "This time we are far from losing. Why do we need to leave? In my eyes, we still have a 50% chance of winning this Monster King battle." Wu Ye and Jichong were both speechless. They guessed that Zhongshe probably couldn't accept reality and spouted such nonsense. The latter directly scoffed coldly, turning around and leaving. He thought that no matter how smart and talented a person was, if he didn't go through some training, he wouldn't be able to become someone great. Just one failure, and he actually went crazy. However, in the next instance, Zhongshe suddenly said, Brother Shui wants to use the Shui family illusionary mist heart bewitching technique. So you must have brought your illusionary heart mirror over? Shui Moyan, who was standing at the side and smiling from start to finish, raised his lips. So what if I did? Allow me to be direct, but in my eyes, you don't have a chance. Not necessarily. Zhongshe shook his head. I admit that Zhongshe's scheming methods are above mine. However, don't forget, in the end, this person was still a piece of trash. He had never practiced martial arts, nor did he cultivate spiritual techniques. He was worse than a normal person. Since Brother Shui can use the illusionary mist heart bewitching technique, then hiding our tracks isn't a problem. Are you planning to assassinate the crown prince? Shui Moyan's eyes squinted, showing some interest. That is possible. However, you don't have much ability to repay my Shui family. Once this matter succeeds, my Gantia Mountain and even the Zhong family can be the subject of the eight-tail Shui family. How about such a return? Seeing Shui Moyan's bright smile, Zhongshe knew that he was tempted. Following which he said, There's also the Een Dragon Canyon. My Gantia Mountain won't take a single thing. The 30% that we agreed on can be split between Daoming's sect and Xuanzu's sect. Taoist Master Wu Yi was originally a bit unhappy, but after hearing what was said, he smiled. His face warmed up, revealing an amiable and happy expression. Liu Jichong had already walked a dozen steps away, but now he walked back and laughed loudly. Deal. Young Master Zhongs, Jichongs, this time I will go with you. Only, when do you want to attack? Zhongshe, Zhongshe. No matter how smart he was, he could come up with hundreds of schemes. Zhong of his Ed Zhong. Edition. Zhongshe was still riding on that grade 4 war horse, his expression lazy. It wasn't that he was faking it, but that he really wasn't interested at all. He wished that today's matter would end early, so that he could focus on the sword path. With such a huge advantage in his hands, if he still lost in the end, then he would be a fool. In the last life, in the eyes of that Zhongshe who couldn't cultivate and didn't know much about the world, Gantian Mountain was an unsolvable situation. Apart from being a puppet and waiting to die, there was no other path. He had tens of years of experience and had slowly recovered to his last life's cultivation. This small predicament was naturally easily solved. Suddenly, he felt a malicious gaze coming from afar. Zhongshe's brows furrowed, but he didn't care. When you have too many lice, you don't feel itchy. When you have too many debts, you don't have to worry. Since entering the city, there were too many similar gazes filled with killing intent. So many that he was numb to it and wasn't willing to bother. Anyways, no matter what methods they used, Zhongshe would take them on. Chai Yuan lost all hope in his heart, so he didn't delay his actions. In less than half an hour, the entire Chai family, old and young, were sent over. With Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Gang there, naturally he didn't need to worry about them faking it. After another 7 minutes, the private army of the Wind Bear race had already split out 60,000 soldiers. That Chai Yuan still leaned towards Zhongshe and Zongyang. However, after being forced to surrender, he didn't plan to keep his strength. The ones he chose were all the elites. The two armies merged, a total of 140,000 people, majestically galloping towards the west. This time, not only did they have 60,000 more Wind Bear race elite warriors, the 5 towns of the East City Army also had a huge increase in morale. It wasn't like before when the army was wiped out and uneasy. On the contrary, numerous people felt really fortunate. Apart from that, there were also 200,000 elites who were chased at the front to open up a path for the army. In Gantia Mountain City, pretty much everyone practiced martial arts and had decent strength. Everywhere they passed, pretty much everything was flattened. The Wind Bear race's gathering place was just 15 miles away from the I Wolf race camp. The army pushed forward, and in just 15 minutes, they had arrived. At this moment, there were numerous armies closing in. The 50,000 West City Army, as well as the Palace Guards and City Protection Army, a total of close to 100,000. They were all Chiu Wei's trusted subordinates and commanders. The various races in the city who were observing the situation all knew that the outcome was already decided. They all raised their troops and gathered over here. All of a sudden, around where the wolf race lived, in the blink of an eye, there were 300,000 troops gathered. Tens of miles of land were all surrounded. All of a sudden, killing intent charged into the clouds, their aura covering the heavens. War flags waved, armor clanging. The strength of the wolf race wasn't weaker than the Windbear race. Their combat strength was slightly weaker, but they had more people. Their private army was 130,000. The warriors of the race were famous for their bravery and strength. However, at this moment, they were surrounded by armies. Their eyes couldn't help but shine, filled with fear. As for those generals, although their eyes were dark and cold, they were filled with rage. However, they forcefully suppressed it, not showing any intentions to strike back. They could only shrink the formation, allowing the hundreds of thousands of troops to push in, shrinking their space step by step. Only when they couldn't retreat anymore did a bunch of people walk out from within the formation. Most of them were old people. They should be the elders of the wolf race. However, the one at the helm was a young male around 20 years old. The hair on his body was like steel needles. At the center of his brows, there was a crack. It was the purest wolf race bloodline. Zhongshu didn't recognize this person, but Hu Zhongyuan was laughing. I knew that this kid wouldn't be able to take it. Zhongshu looked over with a questioning gaze. Hu Zhongyuan hurriedly explained. This is Ling Feikong's eldest son, Ling Xian. In the past, our relationship was not bad, and we were die-hard friends. This person is different from his father. Ling Feikong always had high hopes for Zhongshu. However, Ling Xian has the same personality as my father. He caused my father to say that we reincarnated in the wrong body. He purposely emphasized the words in the past. Zhongshu shook his head and laughed, not bothering much. The various races in Gantian Mountain City were intertwined with one another and had close relationships with one another. Sometimes, marriage was also a common thing. Fussing about this was asking for trouble. As for the last few sentences, it did make him care a little. However, it was just a little. He didn't know whether or not Hu Zhongyuan was trying to speak good words for his good friend. Anyways, no matter whether or not this Ling Xian had good intentions towards him, he didn't care. Since things had reached such a stage, no matter what methods they used, he would be able to wipe them out. Only to see that Ling Xian walk in front of the two armies, immediately getting off his horse and bowing. Wolf race Ling Xian, please meet the prince to talk. Zhongshu couldn't help but pout. If Ling Feikong personally came, then it was more like it. A race leader's son, he had to personally meet him. How low would his status be? Looking at the situation, if Ling Feikong didn't come, then the discussion wouldn't go well. Raising 3 fingers to the side, Zhongshu scoffed. Tell him that if he doesn't surrender, then we will fight. Either his race is wiped out or he surrenders. There is no other path. Hu Zhongyuan instantly understood, hurriedly galloping to the front of the formation. His eyes were filled with pity as he looked at Ling Xian on the ground. Then, he regained his calmness. The prince said that within 300 breaths. If he doesn't surrender, then we will wipe out the entire wolf race. Zhongshu was startled. This fellow really cared about relationships. He was only planning to give him 30 breaths of time and not give him time to consider. However, he changed it to 300 breaths. Thinking about it, he didn't bother much about it. Everyone had their own selfish motives. It was him who didn't make it clear. However, when he returned to this matter, he would definitely punish him heavily. That Ling Xian's face was ashen white, his eyes shining uncertainly. The few elders behind him were the same. Their bodies shuddered, showing signs of hesitation. They wanted to agree, but they were worried about something. Just as Ling Xian opened his mouth several times, he was speechless. Outside of the battlefield, a heavy sigh spread out. Prince, our wolf race surrenders. Only to see a person whose clothes fluttered in the wind walk over from the distance. His handsome face was the same as Chai Yuan, filled with a deathly gray color. He walked over from the side, just like that. When he walked beside Ling Xian, he also knelt on the ground. Only then did Zhong Shou's expression change slightly. He urged the horse and leisurely walked in front of the two of them. Then his eyes were ice cold as he stared at Ling Feikong. Although this person was calm, his face was ashen white. Although his eyes were calm, one could see his regret. Zhong Shou smiled. Do you know about the background of the Shui family? Knowing the ambitions of the Shui family, you still want to be on the same side as Zhong Shi? Seeing his body shudder, Zhong Shou shook his head. He pulled out Hu Zhongyuan's Tiger King knife and threw it in front of Ling Feikong. Uncle Ling, you really made a mistake this time. The Eye Wolf race also needs to give me an explanation. Chapter 248. Ling Feikong looked at the Tiger King knife in front of his eyes in shock. First, he was at a loss. Moments later, he came back to his senses. This prince actually wanted him, Ling Feikong, to commit suicide here. That's right, their Ling family was different from the Chai family. Although everyone knew that the Wind Bear race leaned towards Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang, they didn't do anything substantial. Their Eye Wolf race went into battle, and they had to give an explanation. At this moment, the people around were all silent. No one spoke. Even Hu Zhongyuan kept his mouth shut at this moment. In the bloody power struggle of this era, the winner was the king, the loser was the bandit. That was the theory. Zhong Shou's tone. He continued, Uncle Ling, you are my father's old subject. However, this time you're really wrong. If I don't deal with you, how can I, Zhong Shou, convince the people in the future? Ling Feikong looked at the hundreds of thousands of soldiers around, as well as the sharp knife in front of him, following which, he gave out a bitter smile. His hand trembled as he was about to pick up the Tiger King knife to kill himself to atone for his sins. Ling Xian, who was at the side, unexpectedly took the knife first. He knelt down once more. Prince want my wolf race to give an explanation. Ling Xian is my father's direct eldest son. Can I help him receive the punishment? Zhong Shou blinked his eyes in shock. This time he took a close look at Ling Xian. 5 meridians of the earth chakra level, similar to Hu Zhongyuan in the past. His talents were similar. However, his personality was better. Looking at his strength, he didn't lack much and didn't have any bottlenecks. In the next moment, he saw Chai Yuan gallop over from the private army of the Wind Bear race. His face was ashen white as he got off the horse and knelt down. Chai Yuan begs the prince to let Ling Country Duke live. Brother Ling and I were dumb and were fooled by Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang. However, we didn't have any bad intentions. Chai Yuan is willing to guarantee that Ling Country Duke will follow the rules and won't dare to go against them. Ah, dumb? I think you all are too smart. When Zhong Shou heard that, he scoffed coldly. However, looking around, he saw that although Hu Zhongyuan and Zhong Gang didn't say anything, their faces were filled with sincerity. Thus, he gave up on the thought of forcing Ling Feikong to kill himself. His position wasn't stable, and there were too few people he could use. He also had to consider the feelings of these old officials. It was still far from the time to make a promise. That being said, it was indeed a pity for him to be destroyed like this with 8 meridians of the spiritual martial realm and the combat strength of the spiritual technique. Thinking for a moment, Zhong Shou, Country Duke's decision, he could avoid committing suicide, but the Duke of Spirit Nation would be demoted by 1 rank, and the position of the Eye Wolf tribe's leader would be handed over to Ling Xian. Today, all the Eye Wolf race people who participated in Zhong Shi's rebellion, the Ling family will cut off their heads and send them over. Those below battalion generals will be punished for their crimes. Along with Ling Feikong, they will serve in the center camp for 20 years. The Eye Wolf clan reduced another 50,000 private soldiers and transferred them to the border to guard. Are you willing to accept such a punishment? Ling Feikong's body trembled once more. He raised his head, only to see Zhong Shou's eyes were clear, burning, and filled with coldness. He knew that such an outcome couldn't be changed. His face turned even whiter as he lowered his head. Ling Feikong obeys. Apart from the private army, the I Wolf race had close to 160,000 people serving in the army. Within Gantian Mountain City, there were over 3,000 people with military positions. Country generals and above killing themselves, those below entering the center camp. Another 50,000 moved to the border to defend. One could say that it was a heavy blow that they had never faced before. It pretty much weakened their Ling family's power within Gantian Mountain City to the extreme. It also temporarily cut off the possibility of their Ling family betraying. And this kind of punishment just happened to step on the bottom line in his heart. Forcing him to kill himself was just a show to scare him, such that he didn't have the courage to bargain and resist the punishment. All of a sudden, his eyes were startled as he looked at Zhong Shou. This kid's style was obviously different from Zhong Weiran's, but his tactics were no weaker. Only then did Zhong Shou smile, making the people around feel like they were bathed in the spring breeze. Since this Ling family was dealt with, then there was only one last step left. Losing the support of Ling Feikong and Chai Yuan, Zhong Shi was just a direct bloodline disciple of the Zhong family. The 10 over towns he controlled were far from enough to support the situation. With the hundreds of thousands of troops gathered here, it was enough to sweep them. However, just as such a thought rose up, he saw the group of soldiers in the distance were pushed to the sides. The people who came were Hu Zhongyuan and Xiuwei. Behind them followed 2,000 Iron Tiger race, Iron Tiger halberd warriors. There were also 3,000 black armored infantry who were all 7 feet tall, wearing heavy armor. By their waists hung 10 feet long mo knives. Zhong Shou took just one look and knew that this was the personal army built up by Xiuwei, another elite of Gantian Mountain City, wind-splitting mo knife soldiers. The only one that wasn't made up of a pure race, the monster race and human race mixed together. They were all loyal to Xiuwei. Apart from these 5,000 elites, there were many people who were escorted over. There were a total of a few thousand, with the Sky Fox Zhong family as the main force. It took up 1/6. Not far away, there were 2 people who were all alone. Looking out, in Zhong Shou's memory, he found a match right away. It was Zhong Hao and Zhong Xiuan. However, at this moment, the 2 of them weren't as spirited as they were in his memory. They were both in a bad state. The people around all avoided the 2 of them like they were the plague. Zhong Xiuan was still okay, like he had given up. He was expressionless. That Zhong Hao was a little worried, his face filled with trepidation. Zhong Shou's brows couldn't help but rise up. He knew that Hu Zhongyuan and Xiuwei had already swept out Zhong Shi's remaining forces. This saved him a lot of effort. Hu Qinshu rode his horse over. He originally wanted to laugh out loud. However, when he looked at him, he was like a walking corpse. The listless Chai Yuan and Ling Feikong looked at one another, sighing to themselves. If they knew this would happen, why did they do what they did? It wasn't good for them to be too gleeful in front of the 2 of them. He waved his huge hand and heavily patted Zhong Shou's shoulder to vent his excitement. As for that Xiuwei, he was even calmer. Looking up and down at Zhong Yuan, a weird glow flashed in his eyes. His heart was filled with happiness, peace, and relief. Zhong Shou smiled, bowing solemnly. This time it is all thanks to Uncle Qiu. Zhong Shou has no words to thank you. Please accept my bow. That Xiuwei immediately moved aside. However, when he looked at Zhong Shou, he still bowed solemnly. His expressionless face couldn't help but change, his eyes warm. The prince doesn't need to do that. Xiuwei is the subject of the previous ruler. Helping the prince is the responsibility of a subject. Zhong Shou's lips couldn't help but twitch. Why didn't he see Zhong Xiuan and the others doing that? He liked this Xiuwei. Zhong Weiran was a 10-year monster king. Although he left many problems for Gantian Mountain, he knew how to judge people. His subordinates and officials were all outstanding people. Prince, you don't have to bother about him. His personality is too cold. However, in our Gantian Mountain, he is the one who follows the rules the most. No matter how much you praise him, he won't be happy. Hu Qinshu shook his head, following which his tiger eyes opened wide, his tone changing. As for these people, They are the trusted aides of Zhong Ming and Zhong Hao. How was the prince prepared to deal with them? Only then did Zhong Shou look over, carefully looking at the group of people who were forcefully forced to kneel hundreds of feet away. Roughly 6,000 of them. There were people from various races and divisions. The robes and armor they wore were all above lieutenant level. One could see how strong Zhong Shi and Zhong Yang were and how deeply they infiltrated. Most of them were extremely dejected and perturbed, as if they had just passed away. On the other hand, those few hundred Sky Fox race people were really calm. Not only were they not shocked or afraid, they were really calm. There were even a portion of them who were laughing softly. Zhong Shou shook his head when he saw that. How much did Zhong Weiran pamper the Zhong family? How did he raise such a weirdo? Just as he was about to give the order, another group of people dashed over like lightning. There were over 10 of them, all dressed beautifully, wearing a light fur coat, and all of them were a little old. Just as they got close, someone shouted, "Prince, please wait, we have something to say." Zhong Shou frowned. His eyes filled with confusion as he looked to the side. Hu Zhongyuan got close to his ear and replied softly, "This is your Zhong family race elder meeting." Only then did Zhong Shou understand. In his heart, he was guessing that these so-called Sky Fox elders were here to ask for mercy for the Zhong family direct bloodline disciples. Then he saw that when those people got close, they didn't bow. The white-haired old man at the front simply cupped his fists. "Prince, are you crazy? Why do you want to capture our Zhong family direct bloodline disciples? Don't you know that these people are the pillars of our Zhong family?" Zhong Gang frowned when he heard that these people are on Zhong Shi's side, plotting a rebellion. "Why can't we capture them?" "Shut up. What right do you have to speak?" That white-haired old man scolded, causing Zhong Gang's face to flush red. Following which his tone turned gentle. "They were just tempted by Zhong Shi. It isn't a big crime. Which young person hasn't taken the wrong path before? Actually, just give them a light punishment. Prince, you have to think carefully. Our Zhong family doesn't have many people. Don't be tricked by others and destroy your own wall. When going to war, your own family is more reliable." While saying that, he glanced at Hu Qianxiu and Qiu Wei, causing their faces to turn green. As soon as this person finished speaking, another red-faced old man opened his mouth and said, "Crown Prince Su Lai's natural disposition is amiable and magnanimous. Returning to the city to take over is what everyone wants, is right and proper. During the race elder meeting, I will definitely vote for you. Since the late monarch has passed away, the heir will naturally take over the position of clan head." His tone was weird, causing the surrounding people to fall silent. As for Zhong Gang, Zhong Yuan, and the others, their eyes were filled with worry. Even a fool could hear the threat in the words of this Sky Fox race elder. Hu Zhongyuan and Qiu Wei kept silent. This matter was a Zhong family matter. Moreover, with the current situation, they could only bear with it and compromise. It wasn't suitable to deal with these Sky Fox direct bloodline disciples. Zhong Shou didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed, looking up at the sky. Even if he didn't care much about the Monster King position, at this moment he felt really depressed. However, a moment later, Zhong Shou forcefully suppressed it, grinning. "I only want to say that my personality and that of my father are a little different." Chapter 249. I only want to say that my personality and that of my father are a little different. When those 10 over elders heard that, they didn't understand, looking at Zhong Shou in shock. In the next instance, they heard Zhong Shou laugh coldly. "Uncle Qiu, Uncle Hu, let them focus on cutting people down. No matter what their family background, what identity they have, chop them all up. Within Gantia Mountain City, kill anyone who goes against me. Today we can't be biased." The moment he said that, not only did those 10 over elders think that they had heard wrongly, even Qiu Wei was stunned on the spot. With his shrewdness, all of a sudden he didn't know how to react. He didn't know whether he should try to persuade him or follow his orders. Even Hu Qianxiu was hesitant. He knew what the prince wanted, to suppress the arrogance of the Sky Fox direct bloodline. However, if these 1,000 over Zong family direct bloodline disciples died here, it wouldn't be a small matter, seeing that the people around didn't react at all. The 3,000 winds splitting Immo knife soldiers in the distance also didn't make a move. Zhongsho's brows were tightly furrowed. In the next moment, he smacked the grade 4 Wind Rider foal under him. In a few breaths, he crossed hundreds of feet. He dashed in front of those Sky Fox race, people who were already panicking. The lightning-winged sword in his hand slashed down, slicing off the head of one of them. His body and head split into two, following which that Wind Rider foal stood up, its hooves stepping down. The grade 4 war horse's majestic body had millions of kilograms of strength, directly smashing the head of another person into meat paste. Zhongsho suddenly turned around, his eyes filled with rage. I said attack. Didn't the two of you hear me? Only then did Xiao Wei come back to his senses. After being scolded by Zhongsho, not only was he not annoyed, but his eyes shone brightly, filled with endless joy. On the other hand, Hu Qinqiu sighed slightly, grinning, following which he hollered towards his subordinates. You bastards! Are you all deaf or mute? Didn't you hear what the prince said? What are you waiting for? Xiao Wei, on the other hand, was very polite. He bowed to Zhongsho and said, Xiao Wei accepts the order. The dozen or so Zhong clan elders were instantly enraged. They all pointed at Zhongsho from afar, their bodies trembling. The white-haired old man reacted faster and said with a trembling voice, Stop! Stop! Prince, have you really gone mad? Don't forget that they're your blood relatives, and they don't deserve to die. I will ask them to apologize to you and beg you to show mercy and spare their lives. The close to 1,000 Zhong family members were completely at a loss. At first, many people looked at Zhongsho with contempt. Only now did he realize that the weak-looking teen in front of him was already above tens of thousands of people in Gantian Mountain City, someone whose words carried weight. Their lives and deaths were in the hands of a single thought. On the other side, Zhongsho laughed silently, the coldness in his eyes slowly retreating. Just as the dozen or so Zhong clan elders all relaxed and thought that there was still hope, Zhongsho's lightning-winged sword casually waved to the side. A snow-white sword light slashed across, and instantly another head flew up, rolling on the ground. And this sword strike was like a signal. Those 2,000 Iron Tiger halberd warriors and 3,000 wind-splitting Immo knife warriors all attacked expressionlessly. They waved their halberds and Immo knives, all cleanly slashing down. In just a moment, 5,000 heads suddenly fell to the ground. They were all experts trained on the battlefield, and they didn't hesitate at all. Many people didn't even have time to cry out. The small region in front of Zhongsho was instantly dyed red. All of a sudden, this tens of miles of land was covered in a blood glow, vengeful energy surging. The hundreds of thousands of armored soldiers around, including the hundreds of thousands of a wolf race private army, were all silent. The people in front of them were all people with small power in Gantian Mountain City. Most of them were born in noble families. There were also a few who had prominent families with extraordinary backgrounds. However, at this moment, they were all slaughtered like dogs. They were all killed here. To everyone here, it was an unimaginable blow to their souls. When they looked at Zhongsho once more, they only felt that the prince's body was a little taller. There was still no aura around him, but for some reason there was an aura which made them unable to look straight at him. Those 10 over-elders were all unable to make a sound, staring blankly at the corpses on the ground. A few of them couldn't help but tear up. It was still Zhong Gang who laughed happily right away. I, Zhong Gang, have followed the ruler since I was 26. I followed him to war for 10 years. However, there was never a day when I felt so carefree. Good kill. How satisfying. The prince and the ruler are really different. If it were up to me, it would be better to exterminate all of these people from the main bloodline. That red-faced old man's eyes constricted when he heard that, following which he said hysterically, Zhongsho, you are crazy. All of you are crazy. They're the elites of our Zhong family. Do you know where the essence is? Their bloodline is innately much nobler than your side branches, and they are born with 3 tails. You bastards actually dared to attack. I will invite Uncle Zong out. Even if I die, I won't let you take over as the race leader. That white-bearded old man's face was sunken, his eyes as cold as knives as he stabbed towards Zong Shou. The prince is vicious and merciless, killing your family. It isn't a blessing for our Zong family. I, Zong Rue, will invite Uncle Zong to remove your position as the heir, not to mention taking over as the Monster King. You can forget about being the prince. When he said that, the 2 people beside him were like crazy tigers as they pounced towards Zong Shou. Their faces were filled with maniacal violence. However, before they even got close, Zong Gang had already jumped over on his horse. The MO sword in his hand swept out with the force of a thunderbolt. Only to hear a loud "Keng." Zong Gang stood still on the horse while the 2 of them were swept away by a huge force, their faces turning purple. Following which, Zong Gang laughed coldly. You dare to assassinate the prince. Your crimes are unforgivable. Kill. The silver scale wind-stepping beast under him suddenly stepped forwards. 1 man and 1 horse brought about many afterimages as they smashed into the 2 of them. The MO knife waved, slicing the 2 Zong family race leaders in the air at their waists, splitting their bodies into 2. Following which, Zong Gang waved his knife once more, scattering the bloodlight. He pointed at the Zong family race elders whose faces were ashen white. What direct bloodline? You are just a bunch of useless people. I have long found all of you an eyesore. If it wasn't for the ruler suppressing me, do you believe that I would be the first to kill all of you? If you want to remove the prince, then just do it. The race meeting, who knows who will win and who will lose? Let's see if the 800,000 clansmen of the Heavenly Fox clan are stronger than you direct descendants. My Junshang is still more popular. Zong Rue was already unable to speak. Under the suppression of Zong Gang's knife, even opening his mouth was tough. Pretty much no one expected that Zong Gang would be so bold and crazy to kill Sky Fox elders on the spot. Zong Shou broke out into a laugh. Race meeting? He didn't have such intentions. If he wanted to solve this matter, there was a much simpler way. Why did he have to go through so much trouble? All right, there was also that Zong Bo. Who knew who he was? He had never seen him before. The Great Elder was the leader of the race elder meeting. Zong Bo was in charge of the rewards and punishments of the race members. Zong Bo was in charge of the ancestral temple and the family assets. He had the most power and authority in a race. However, Zong Shou had never seen him before and didn't even remember his name. He directly shook his head. If you are unhappy, you can invite Zong Bo over. Just say that I, Zong Shou, am waiting for him at the peak of Gantian Mountain. After saying that, he was lazy to bother about these race elders. He smiled as he looked at Ling Feikong and Ling Xian. Both of their hearts jumped as they lowered their heads once more. Originally, they were unhappy in their hearts. To the Wolf race, this was a calamity. However, at this moment, most of their grievances had dissipated. To punish the Zong family people so heavily, the others had nothing to say. Although the punishment was heavy, they couldn't say that the prince was unfair. Zong Shou then looked towards Zong Hao and Zong Xiwan. The 2 of them stood a little further away, 1,000 feet away. The latter half knelt on the ground, while Zong Hao was unsettled. A moment later, when he looked at the corpses all over the ground and then at Zong Yuan, he gritted his teeth. He jumped onto his horse and galloped into the distance. Zong Shou's brows rose up, finding it amusing. This Zong Hao knew that he couldn't win against him, so he decisively gave up and took the risk to surrender. However, he was wary of him, not bringing Zong Yang and coming alone. When he saw how decisively he killed close to 1,000 Zong family people, he knew that he had no choice. Knowing that he had no chance of survival, he immediately ran away. However, at this moment, wasn't it too late? Zong Yuan, without waiting for Zong Shou to shout out, Zong Yuan's dragon-horned winged horse had already charged out from the army. He had been staring right at Zong Hao. At this moment, under Zong Yuan's control, The dragon-horned winged horse was as swift as lightning. Instantly, it closed hundreds of feet. Then, numerous lightning gathered on the purple lightning spear in his hand. When two 500-foot lightning wings spread out on both sides of the spear body, Zhong Yuan suddenly tossed it out. This purple lightning spear was instantly increased to the maximum. Under the push of the lightning, it increased by tens of times. Pretty much before Zhong Hao could react, it had already pierced through him. Zhong Hao's expression changed as he tried his best to dodge. However, his shoulder was still pierced. His entire body was brought forward by the spear. It actually pinned him to the ground in front of him. Just as Zhong Hao was in extreme pain, using all the energy in his body to barely block that exploding lightning glow. Zhong Yuan's horse was already in front of him. A cavalry knife flashed in front of his eyes, and then he felt his eyes go black, unable to feel anything. This knife actually started from his ear and passed through his eye. One knife sliced off his skull. Instantly white matter and blood splattered everywhere. Zhong Hao didn't even take a look, only hollering into the sky, venting his endless rage and hatred. Only after a long while did that howl slowly calm down. In the end, Zhong Yuan rode his horse back to the side of Zhong Shou, getting off the horse and kneeling. Zhong Yuan has taken revenge. My wish has been fulfilled. From now on, I am the sword in the prince's hand. At your command, I have no regrets. Zhong Shou blinked, asking curiously, I thought that you would ask him about what happened a few years ago, about your father's death in battle. No need. Zhong Yuan raised his head, his expression expressionless. I just need to know that my father died because of Zhong Hao and his accomplices. No matter whether or not they are involved, killing them all won't be wrong. Oh, that makes sense. Zhong Shou laughed involuntarily, indicating for Zhong Yuan to get up. At this moment, he was already beside Zhong Xiuan, looking down at this uncle of his from above. Chapter 250. Only to see Zhong Xiuan silently half-kneeling, his face ashen white. He gritted his teeth and didn't say anything to beg for mercy. Zhong Shou only felt his head hurt. He really didn't know how to deal with this uncle of his. In the last life, Zhong Xiuan actually didn't do much bad things to Zhong Shou. Based on what he knew, Zhong Xiuan at that time was controlled by someone and couldn't control himself. After all, in name, he was Zhong Shou's only living relative. Killing him with one knife was satisfying. However, Zhong Weiran, who hid in the Oblivion Ocean, would return one day. At that time, who knows what his cheap father would think about this matter? This era emphasized the word filial piety, and one had to consider the views of others. After hesitating for a moment, Zhong Shou's tightly frowned brows relaxed. Actually, he didn't need to worry. He just needed to uphold the word fair. Then no matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to interfere. Even if Zhong Weiran returned, he couldn't be blamed. I heard that you personally led the Sky Fox Shui family over. Uncle, don't you know the reason why father rejected the Shui family? Don't you know that you are leading a wolf into the house? Zhong Xiuan's expression twisted, instinctively wanting to explain. However, moments later, he calmed down. A thread of blood seeped out from the corner of his lips. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed. Looking at the situation, there seemed to be something hidden. Did he fall for the Shui family's illusionary mist heart bewitching technique, which was why he was like that? However, he didn't care much about this matter and didn't pity him. If Zhong Weiran didn't have such thoughts, even if it was the Shui family's illusionary mist heart bewitching technique, it wouldn't cause him to have such ambitions. Taking in a deep breath, Zhong Shou made a decision. Colluding with the enemy and plotting for the throne, that is a sin. You're my uncle, so I can let you off. Today, I will remove you from your position as the right pillar general. He waved his sword and sliced down. Zhong Xiuan instinctively wanted to dodge. However, just as his body moved slightly, he stopped once more, his face filled with sadness. He only felt a sharp intent pressing down on him from the side. It was as if he would harm Zhong Shou if he made the slightest move. They would immediately attack and kill him on the spot. This junior called Zhong Yuan had actually grown to such a terrifying level. At this very moment, he had lost all hope. Even if Zhong Shou killed him on the spot, he would have no complaints. When the sword light reached the top of his head, it suddenly changed its trajectory and slashed to the side. With an explosion of blood, Zhong Xuan's left arm was completely severed. In just half a breath, an intense pain struck into Zhong Xuan's will. For a moment, he was drenched in cold sweat, but he still forcefully supported his body and straightened his back. Only then did Zhong Shou finish his sentence, demote him to a commoner, and punish him with a broken arm. Are you convinced? His eyes were filled with shock. That sword just now did have some probing elements. However, Zhong Xuan's reaction was beyond his expectations. This person seemed to be willing to die. He originally wanted to say that his cultivation would be destroyed, but he changed it to demote him to a commoner. This Zhong Xuan was different from that Zhong Hao. He only felt his heart relax. Today's matter was half completed. The only one left was that Zhong Shi. It was also at this moment that everyone in the area dropped to their knees. First, it was Wu Qianqiu and Qiu Wei. Next, it was Wu Zhongyuan and Zhonggang. Then, everyone nearby bowed towards Zhong Shou. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers all knelt on the ground. We welcome the prince back to the city to continue the great work of the late ruler. If this was before he entered the city, Zhong Shou would definitely be pumped up by such a scene, his blood boiling, and he would be filled with pride. At this moment, he just laughed. His emotions were really calm. His heart was filled with self-mocking intent. It was impossible for someone like him to be a good demon king, just as he was about to wave his hand to ask them to rise. Shortly after, he felt his soul ocean explode. Who knows if it was a warning sign or something, but his soul ocean whirlpool and Dantian were boiling. It was like it was filled with joy, but also like it was filled with fear and rejection. Anyways, he felt threads of energy gathering in his body. However, Zhong Shou's expression was really weird. This energy, is it the so-called Emperor Path energy? The so-called Emperor Path energy was actually gathered from the thoughts of the people and the strength of the country. When it reached a certain level, it would gather into a physical form, and then the king energy would be added to the body. This thing had many benefits. With this king path energy protecting the body, anyone who wanted to assassinate him would have to pay a huge price. If one could use it well, using the strength of the country, even a person who didn't cultivate would be able to kill those high-grade martial cultivators and spirit masters. However, there were naturally many disadvantages. Restricted by heaven and earth, one's lifespan would decrease. Be it martial or spiritual cultivation, there would be obstructions. This was why the so-called King Path martial arts didn't cultivate the mind, soul, only focusing on the strength of the martial path. If the country was strong and the people were safe, the army was strong, one could go up against the experts of the world. Like the Liu family, which occupied 800 small worlds, the head of the family wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he fought with Saint Realm experts. However, based on what Zhong Shou knew, to form the Emperor Path energy, one had to rule over hundreds of millions of people. Moreover, one had to have the foundations of the dynasty and the hearts of the people. Although Gantia Mountain City had 5 provinces of land, most of them were subordinate cities. There were only 10 cities directly under them, over 80 million people. Moreover, they had only built the city for 10 years, so most of them shouldn't be loyal. Moreover, he was the prince, and his current situation was still at a time when the country was in doubt. Just based on this little bit of capital, how did he manage to gather this troublesome King Dao energy? This thing might be something that others wished for. However, to him, it was pretty much a poison. Heaven and earth had their own laws. Although the Emperor Path energy was strong, it naturally had many restrictions on the person who had it. What Zhong Shou cared about was the pinnacle of the martial path. However, he wasn't interested in having any achievements in King Path martial arts. Originally, He was planning to get the Monster King position and then search for the secret treasures in his memory to solve this problem. Or, if he didn't have enough time, he would choose a talent from the Zong family to give up the position. However, he didn't expect that this thing would come so quickly. However, after this energy gathered, it couldn't be dissipated. It stubbornly wrapped around and directly drilled into his body. No matter how the true chi and soul power in his body tried to chase it out, it couldn't be chased away. In the end, it was slowly showing signs of merging with his physical body. Just as his face was covered in cold sweat and he was crying out in pain, Zhongsho suddenly had an idea and looked towards his soul ocean at the illusionary spirit sword floating at the center of the whirlpool. I forgot. I still have a second soul. The second soul was the incarnation of his soul and was also a part of his body and soul. If he used it to absorb the King Path energy, he would most probably succeed. However, when such a thought rose up, he couldn't help but feel pained. This illusionary spirit sword was something he spent so much effort to form. To raise it to such a level, he spent a lot of effort, using soul power to temper it and occasionally injecting runes in. However, at this moment, sacrificing this illusionary spirit sword was better than letting the King Path energy taint his body and soul. Without hesitation, following Zhongsho's thoughts, the One Origin sword swam around his body and absorbed some of the energy. In just a moment, the sword body of the One Origin sword became extremely solid. It was already incomparably condensed and gradually turned into a bright yellow color. One could even clearly feel the vast amount of power contained within the sword body. Zhongsho wasn't happy, but worried instead. This change messed up all his future plans. He didn't know what to do with this second primordial spirit that should be renamed Sovereign Tao Origin Sword in the future. Using this illusionary spirit sword to block, it wasn't a long-term plan. Fortunately, there were only a few strands of the bright yellow aura that had condensed. He absorbed all of it. Zhongsho frowned, looking towards Zhong Yuan in deep thought. The only thing he could think of now was this change. The Battle of Ruahai Straits was for the strength of the country. Thousands of troops stepped on the formation to threaten Yunxia and Blazing Flame City such that they wouldn't be able to cause problems in the short term. However, just one more unparalleled general seed. His reputation increased, and he won over some people's hearts. How could he make his strength of the country strong to such an extent? Before ascending to the throne, he had gathered up a thread of Emperor Path energy. How weird. In the next instance, Zhongsho comprehended something, his face changing between green and white. Could it be because of him? The strength of a country involved prestige, talents, people's livelihood, military strength, etc. If one more Zhong Yuan could make Gantian Mountain's military strength flourish, then what about him? In terms of formations, he asked himself whether he was above Zhong Yuan. Although Zhong Yuan was an unparalleled general seed. After all, he was still young and couldn't compare to the commanding skills that he had trained in the future through thousands of battles. At this moment, he really wanted to slap himself in front of everyone. He had calculated everything, but he had missed out on his own factors. Instantly, he was dejected, totally lacking the high spirits from before. The position of Demon King was simply a huge trap. Damn it, this was just too much of a trap. Luckily, he had this One Origin sword which could replace his main body, which was why he had a chance of salvaging the situation. The people around didn't notice anything. Zhongsho not only didn't show any joy, but his expression was dark. They all thought that Zhongsho was feeling sad about what happened today. They couldn't help but be moved. Zhongsho was decisive and killing, vicious and merciless, which made one respect him. However, at this moment, looking at his pained and pitiful expression, it was obvious that he wasn't a bloodthirsty person, which made one feel more at ease. Even Zhong Xuan, who had his arm cut off, had his eyes wavering, showing a look of regret. Hu Qinxiu was a rough person and didn't have so many emotions. He was a little impatient, raising his head. The country can't be without a ruler for a day. Prince, please head to Chongzheng Hall to ascend to the throne, and take over as Monster King. Only then did Zhongsho come back to his senses, looking at the Gantian mountain peak, following which he broke out into a laugh. This matter was already set in stone, and no matter how much he struggled, it was useless. At most, he would think of a way in the future. Now, it was best if he settled all the important matters. He only felt that with this last step completed, he had totally solved one of Zhongsho's wishes with the heart barrier removed, even if his cultivation didn't improve by a small amount. In the future, his cultivation would be able to cut off this burden. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.